A dungeon was built long ago for students under the Galadon Kingdom Magic Academy, and the highest floor anyone cleared was the 37th. This record is about to be broken by a legendary team of 4 geniuses who reached the 68th floor, and their dungeon-o clearing speed shows no sign of slowing. The legendary, powerful group of 4 geniuses was called Endless Days. Alec Juglet, the court magician, paced the 29th floor of the dungeon, a vast, misty expanse scattered with abandoned buildings and graves. Alec wore light clothes with a raincoat and a scarf around his neck, walked across a wide, shallow lake, stepped onto dry ground, discovered a foggy swamp, and said aloud that he could use the magic to walk on water right now. It does not matter to him, so they went to the 30th floor anyway. He lowers his scarf and walks to a low pedestal overgrown with the roots of a nearby tree, where a round glass ball sits. Wondering if he needs any weapons, he knows he doesn't understand anything, reaches out to the ball, and sadness shows in Alex's eyes as he remembers that 4 years have passed. He remembers 4 people standing beside him, smiling and reaching for the glass ball. Alec came to his senses, slapped his face with both hands to stop the memories, then put his hand to the ball and told himself he didn't care about those people, especially now that he had someone to protect. After a while, Alec joined his team, which included Regulus the Crown Prince, Lenny, and X. Regulus told Alec they needed to talk briefly. Alec, who was looking through his backpack, closed it and turned to Regulus. He asks if His Majesty wants to know about the dungeon or the next floor. His Majesty says he only wants to ask Alec a question. He then asks Alec to tell him what his task is there. I like answers that show confusion about his task of supporting His Highness with his magic. Regulus asks what Alec was supposed to do in their last fight, and Alec still does not understand what His Highness means. Regulus explains that as Crown Prince, he wields a sword better than anyone. Lena is best at fire magic, and X holds off opponents perfectly. After that, Regulus watches Alex's actions in the fight, as Alex neither defends nor helps the others, but uses only support magic, and he cannot understand how a court magician could be limited to that. Alec tries to defend himself, arguing His Highness is wrong and support magic is vital to the group, but Regulus interrupts and refuses to hear any excuses. Alec's constant requests that they step back because they are not ready bother him, and he is tired of it. Alec asks His Highness for a chance to explain himself. Regulus did not like it, and asked Alec to explain what was behind his back, so Alec hesitated, drew a small weapon, and said it was a short sword that he thought would not get in the way on the next floor. Regulus snatches Alec's sword and grabs his robe, saying he already told Alec he would not need a weapon, scolding him for acting on his own in the group and saying he has always opposed that and does not want people like Alec. Regulus tightens his grip on the court magician's cloak, grins, says his father told him to put up with Alec but his patience has run out, and immediately pulls the cloak off Alec. He insists the robe is too fine for him, and that they will take good care of it. Alec stands silently. Regulus says as he leaves that the day after tomorrow he will go to defend the 30th floor of the dungeon without him. X and Lenny leave after the Crown Prince. Regulus adds that Alec can go wherever he wants and does not need a court magician who uses support magic. Night had fallen and Alec sat in his room dipping his pen into a jar of ink as he wrote his notes until he paused to think. Alec realized he could not help his team. The 30th floor did not allow magic, and he was too dangerous even for them. Alec had believed he had been supporting them all along and that they trusted one another. Alec knew how the Crown Prince and the others felt about him, but he did not know they thought he was holding them back. Alec recalls the Crown Prince scolding him for the court magician attacking without permission and for demanding obedience, and the prince ignoring Alec's warning about their heavy luggage by saying he still had one hand free. Words also flash through his head that he is no longer needed, which makes the pen in Alec's hand twitch and his face frown. After a moment, Alec sighed and picked up his notes. He wasn't going to give up yet, and he had made a lot of notes about the next floor, hoping His Majesty would understand everything after reading them. Alec realizes he is not strong enough and will not underestimate the dungeon. The next day, Alec reaches the castle, but the guards refuse to let him in, saying civilians are forbidden in the royal palace. He tries to explain as Lenny approaches. She asks what he wanted in the palace, and when Alec asks her to explain, she says he has not yet been told that from that day on he was no longer the kingdom's court magician. Alec refuses to believe what he hears. Grinning, Lenani says she heard what happened on the 68th floor and thinks it is a pretty funny story. She says Alec should be ashamed of himself for angering the prince. Alec asks her to at least give his letter to King Felix. He says he joined His Highness Regulus's group only on the king's orders and expects the king to understand everything after reviewing the records. Lenani responds by ripping up his notes and telling the guards to watch Alec closely. Later, Alec walks the city with a packed suitcase, refusing to accept this is the end after spending 4 years giving his all as a court magician following his graduation from the academy. Alec immediately pushes those thoughts away, determined to show his former comrades what he can do. On his way, Alec sees a student walking past the academy. The sight of the building makes it hard for him to believe he ended up here without realizing it. He remembers spending the night in a dungeon and then going to the graduation dirty and battered. Alec stood at the foot of the staircase that led straight to the nearby Royal Academy of Magic, where he had spent 4 years. A voice calls his name. Alec turns and sees a pretty young girl standing before him. Her eyes go wide as she looks at him. Alec barely has time to say the girl's name, Yora, before she rushes to hug him. The girl insists it is really her and says she never expected to see a hero here, and the young man keeps staring at her in disbelief. Smiling, she says she did not expect to see him here. He suggests asking her what she left behind. Yorha giggles and says it is a secret. Alec and Yorhad go for a walk and talk. Alec learns Yorhad has 5 days before she leaves for Fizzle and is taking a break here. He asks if she is alone, and Yorhad confirms, adding she will be here for a while so they can go somewhere. She asks Alec if he remembers what she said before graduation. Alec remembers every word. From that day on, she said their paths would diverge, but they would meet again, and Yorha suggested he go with her. She also says she needs his strength and invites him to join a 3-person adventuring party. Alec falls silent and covers his eyes with his hand. She asks if he is okay, and he only apologizes. Then your host smiles and apologizes for making such a sudden offer, since Alec is a court magician and adventurer. Alec apologizes again. She says she is glad to hear it, but that she should look for someone more worthy than him. Yorhan anxiously asks him to tell her what happened. After Alec explains what happened, she is outraged that he was exiled and stripped of his title as court magician just for using support magic. Yorha is loudly outraged by the injustice, and Alec says she is speaking too loudly. Afterward, she pouts resentfully. Then she says she'd like to invite Alec to her house anyway, and he's surprised she was looking for him for that. Alec, looking slightly sad, says he is not the same person he was 4 years ago, especially after losing his title. Yorha smiles and says she heard the boss on the 68th floor of the dungeon is Hydra. She also says she found out about it the day before her graduation, and the person who mentioned it said it would be his final test. She remembers gathering supplies and food, and the 4 of them entered a deep dungeon. Yorha and the rest of the team fought the monsters fiercely with defensive support magic. She builds an ice wall to protect herself from the monster's fiery breath. The girl behind her says he will distract the monster so your hug can get out of there. An ice wall rises again, forcing her to struggle because she cannot form the combined 5-element attack magic, and another person approaches them. After apologizing to his comrades for waiting, Alec is greeted with smiles and replies with 5-element magic and a combined attack spell. Alec then unleashes the multicolored strike, landing a powerful blow on the monster. Yorha also remembers the graduation day. At the reward ceremony, graduates talked about the person who went into the dungeon and did not return. 3 others were with him: Onis Lane, Klasia Anaraz, Yorja Isens, and the band leader himself, Alex Juggling. Arriving at the ceremony, they draw surprised looks as all 4 walk together smiling, their bodies bruised and scraped and their clothes torn and stained. Yorhat remembers that on that day the dungeon's 68th floor was cleared and a group of 4 broke up here, so he turns to Alec and asks him to start over and continue their endless days. Alec and Yorha rode a cart to the dungeon city of Fizzle, and the heroes felt the legendary group was finally reunited. Yorho paced happily with a suitcase, calling out to the whole street that they had arrived as she looked around, and Alec noticed many adventurers nearby. Alec and Yorha walked around Fizzle, and Alec told his friend he expected so many adventurers in this city, while Yorha smiled and said it was a great city where adventurers were treated well, and that she and 2 others used it as a meeting place. She says they are staying in a dungeon outside the city for now, and Alec of Yorhatel adds they must register him as an adventurer before they leave. Delighted that Alec has decided to join them, she looks forward to a new big adventure. Joining the Adventurers Guild, Alec and Yorha ran into an unexpected problem. The clerk signed the form, handed it back to Yorha, and apologized that their application was rejected and they were not allowed into the dungeon. Alec looks confused, and Yora, clearly unhappy with what she heard, forces a nervous smile and does not understand why this is happening. The girl at the counter calls the next person, but Yorha stops her. Her name is Misha. Yorha asks her to change her mind, but Misha says those are the rules and tells them to come back next time to get a pass. Alec asks which pass she means, and Misha explains it's their guild card that lets members enter the dungeon from the 30th floor upward. But it is only given to adventurers who have been in the guild for more than 2 years. Alec hesitates because 2 years feels like a long time to him, and he awkwardly brings his hand to his face. Yorha keeps trying to persuade Misha, saying Klasia told her the guild will be ready to help them. Misha thinks about that and remembers Klasia visiting a few days ago. Yorha smiles as hope returns. The next moment, Misha repeats Klasia's demand that he simply accept him. Alec and Yorha say nothing in response. After giving up, they left the guild and sat on a bench in the middle of the city to buy some food. Yorha clutched her head in frustration, calling herself stupid for assigning a task to Klasia without explaining what to do. Alec tells her not to worry so much. Yorha pouted, took a bite of her sandwich, and said they were on the 52nd floor now, and she didn't want to wait 2 years at all. After finishing her sandwich, she happily jumped off the bench, told herself to cheer up, and suggested Alec try starting over. Alec realizes she is probably referring to the dungeon, and Yorha tells him not to worry, saying he can go to the floors below the 30th because they are adventurers in a city surrounded by dungeons. Yora then leads Alec to Fizzle's central dungeon and says they should enjoy the city to their heart's content. They enter the dungeon and reach the 2nd floor, a dense forest. Pointing her wand at Alec, Yorha casts support magic to strengthen him, and Alec uses his super speed to strike down several flying demons at once. Alec praises you for his support. She is unsure whether Alec should overwork himself so much and says that today they just want to try not to dive deep into the dungeon. She does not understand when it all went wrong or how their simple first adventure after so many years apart became a full-blown disaster, and her eyes widen when she suddenly notices a red hornet in front of her. Alec thinks something has happened to their nest because he has read a little about their kind. Yorha says he does not remember how many hornets were on the 2nd floor. Alec keeps dealing with the hornets, saying they need to get through them, and Yora knows these demons are no match for him, but she is not in good shape right now. She uses support magic to surround herself with a shield, and Alec tries to stop her, calling it crazy for her to go alone, but Yorha demands Alec let her go, saying it knows the hornets cannot penetrate her shield. She asks him to trust her now that he has joined their group, and Alec recalls his earlier command as he asks the Crown Prince not to go into dangerous places alone. To protect the prince, he learned support magic, scouted the dungeons for safe routes, descended into the dungeon, and used his magic to clear every danger. Alec regains his senses. Remembering he is no longer a court magician but an adventurer, he casts attack magic, sending many fiery spears at the hornets. He immediately calls down lightning to finish the monsters, leaving only dust. After that, you give Alec a friendly pat on the back and say it was great. Alec, hearing this, is surprised. Smiling, she admits he made her worry, but he's still the best magician she knows. Alec smiles at his happy girlfriend. The ground cracks under Alex's feet, then splits apart and something bursts out of the dark depths. The unknown creature burst from the ground and in seconds rose high into the air, and Alec, who had not noticed Yorha standing beside him, looked up to see her catch the rod on a giant worm's tooth. Squinting in fright, she grips the wand with both hands and holds on tight, because burning from that height would be painful for her. Alec realizes the mudworm is what makes the hornets rage. He tells Yorth to stay still until he deals with the worm. He picks up his wand and turns to Yorha, asking if she studied support magic at the academy. At first, Yorha looks at the hero in disbelief, then she immediately understands what he means. The girl says she studied it, like him, but he was the best at attacking magic. While at his mansion, the crown prince learns that Uglit has left the kingdom. Lenny says she heard he became an adventurer, and the prince laughs, telling her the dungeon is no place for jokes, and that Uglit will die there at the first chance. Then with a grin he adds that knowing Alec, he will be gone soon. In the dungeon, Alec casts an attack spell and a fiery dragon-like creature forms around him. The points on the worm mark the victim of his spell. Then the dragon coils fully around the worm, trapping it and sealing its fate. After successfully descending into the dungeon, Alec and Yora headed to the bar for a drink, and Yora told him to eat well now that he was part of their group, which amused Alec because his girlfriend was in a good mood. Yora takes several big swigs of alcohol, then turns to Alec with an offended look. She calls his last fire spell gorgeous and says it almost turned them into fried chickens. I anxiously ask his friend if she is okay because it seems to me she drank too much. Your hut tries to reply, but quickly falls asleep. Alec smiles and says his girlfriend is still weak from the alcohol. After that, he covers York with his jacket. A man at the bar grins and says Alec is being very noble. A tall man holding a drink asks him how he could even be an adventurer for Fizzle. I answer casually without looking at the man, and that irritates him, so he starts threatening Alec for not meeting his eyes. Alec keeps drinking, angering the man, who decides to teach him manners and hits him over the head with a bottle. At impact, the girl still slept peacefully. The man smiled maliciously, believing he could teach the hero some manners. Alec's shield stopped the blow, and the man smiled as he said he had finally seen him, using Alec's full name. The man says Alec used to be Geldana's court magician, says he cannot understand how someone from that elite background became an adventurer, then hands Alec a pass. Apologizing for his audacity, the man sips the last of the alcohol from a broken bottle and says Alec already sees how bad off he is. Alec looks unsure, so the man points the broken bottle at him and demands he show more of his abilities. The man sits at a table with Alec and Yora, who is still asleep from drinking, and demands that Alec show more of his abilities to make sure Alec will agree to reveal the past, asking whether he does not want to get it. Gently, he tries to wake Yorth to leave while keeping his eyes on the suspicious man, knowing the man would never agree to such an offer, and wondering who he is. And after a couple of minutes, Yorth finally opens her eyes heavily and lazily asks what happened. Seeing the man in front of her, she recognizes him as a Guildmaster and oddly asks what he is doing here. Alec is surprised the Guildmaster has been standing in front of him all this time. He directs Yora and Alec to follow him, leads them into the Adventurers Guild, takes them to an unusual place, and guides them down unfamiliar tunnels. Walking through, they arrive in a huge underground arena with bleachers, and the Guildmaster proudly says it is the Guild Underground Arena for training. As Alec and Yora looked around, surprised, a man behind them cracked his fingers, flexed his fists, introduced himself to Alec as Rivier Stance, and told him to reveal his full abilities only while removing his cloak. Alec realizes Riviera plans to personally test his skills so she can grant him a pass if needed. Yora urges his friend, saying he may not get another chance and must agree, but Alec looks at his hand and says he probably won't succeed because his mana has not recovered yet. He agrees with Yora that he may not get another chance. Alec tells her he will join her and the others soon. Yora roots for him and says she will wait. Next, Alec steps in front of Rivier, points his wand at him, and says he is ready as Rivier warms up. He says he heard Alec works as Geldana's court magician. Alec replies that he has unfortunately already been fired from that post. While talking to his opponent, Alec remembers having heard of a man named Rivier Erashtance. Alec remembers being a great magician who led a team of S-rank adventurers 10 years ago and realizes Rivier may have been strong then but is different now. Alec knows victory goes to whoever attacks first. He immediately casts his fastest, most reliable spell, a lightning strike, so the enemy has no time to react. Rivier clearly refuses to give the victory to the former court magician so easily and turns the splash into a counterattack, with the two strikes coming from opposite sides and both opponents dodging despite attacking almost simultaneously. The attack's force makes Alec realize Rivier is still very strong and Rivier keeps landing blows while Alec watches him. He realizes Lightning Strike is his fastest spell, but he is amazed that Rivier managed to react and counterattack. After failing to hit at long range, Alec changes his usual tactics and shifts to melee to use combined magic to lower the enemy's guard. Before Alec can reach the opponent, Rivier plants his fist on the ground and casts a support spell called Reinforcement. Before Alec can react, Rivier rushes at him and strikes him in the head, sending the adventurer tumbling back dozens of times into the wall. Yora trembles watching this, worried for her friend as her excitement grows by the minute. Riviera's face shows clear disappointment and a touch of resentment when he realizes Alec used the shield again and did not even try to attack in response. Realizing he managed to react and use it during his accelerated step, he shows his quick response is a commendable skill. Alec agrees but notes it was quite difficult, so he does not overstate his abilities. I also remember him saying that attack is much better than defense, and I see Rivier follow that rule in battle with an attacking defense that is simply unmatched. As a result, Alec saw for himself how destructive an S-rank adventurer's power can be. Alec considers his next move and realizes he cannot use the shield again, so he must quickly find a new tactic against such a dangerous opponent. The moment Alec thinks about it, his mind slips back to those recent, deeply unpleasant memories, and the image of the Crown Prince returns. A smirk crosses Alex's face as he finally remembers the Crown Prince forbade him from using any weapon. Realizing he had been naive just moments before, Alec pulls himself together and finally drops his doubts because the arena is underground. He is not bound by the rules and chooses to use the sword. When Alec attacked right after the shield and seemed to imply Rivier should surrender, Rivier used the splash again, but Alec evaded his attacks and rushed in. Rivier decides victory is his, since at that close range Alec will not have time to block his punch. Unexpectedly for Riviera, Alec does not dodge and simply stands his ground. He warns it will be difficult, but because Riviera decided to attack now, he no longer has a chance to dodge, and Alec uses a lightning bolt on the enemy. The opponents stare at one another in silence. Then Riviere attacks Alec again. He manages to dodge, and everyone falls silent for a few moments. Riviera breaks into a grin and says he is amazed Alec broke his spell so quickly. Riviera adds that Yora seems to have made the right choice. Alec agrees and turns to his opponent. Riviere wakes up, smiles, and says it was a lot of fun, but his mood shows he will not end their fight yet, as his smile turns bloodthirsty and massive iron gloves appear on his hands. Claiming this dragoned ear is his best artifact, he clearly prepares to continue the battle, and Alec watches him with a smirk. Artifacts are valuable dungeon treasures that can be weapons, accessories, or armor, and many adventurers always try to obtain them. It is known exactly how many permanent improvements they can give an owner, and they are quite rare even without magic. Riviera strikes with Dragon Ear, lands a heavy blow, but Alec dodges, and the attack falls to the ground, and Alec picks up his sword thinking Riviera is a liar. Admiring and horrified, Alec watches Riviere smash the stone floor with his gloves like a rotten tree, and realizes the artifact's incredible destructive power in the Guildmaster's hands. Riviere watches his opponent who dodged, grinning as he says the man flew a long way to escape the blow, then mockingly offers him a chance to surrender again. Alec replies with sarcasm as he reaches out to use his attack magic again, a bright, excited smile on the hero's face. Alec fires the thunderstorm projectile at Riviera again, but this time it fails because Riviera protected himself with gloves. He immediately approaches Alec and says the attack does not work on him anymore. Riviera attacks again, but Alec dodges. Riviera has repeatedly said he wants to see the former court magician fight back instead of dodging until he tires. The Guildmaster adds a new rule to their contract and angrily tells Alec he will not get a pass if he keeps running away instead of attacking. A worried look crosses your face as she grows more concerned about Alec and realizes his strategy is not the best. The Guildmaster uses the Dragoneer artifact, an extremely powerful item that greatly increases both attack and defense. Riviera presses the attack and Alec keeps dodging. Magic surrounds Riviera's body and Alec watches in horror and confusion. Johann knows the artifact rapidly repairs wounds, which is why Alec gets worse the longer he fights. Your hut warns the Guildmaster not to hit everyone because he is clearly too strong, and the Guildmaster replies he will because he is clearly determined. Alec decides to attack while the Guildmaster is distracted, but he realizes he cannot handle such force, so Alec strikes Riviera repeatedly to cause new wounds and prevent him from recovering. The Guildmaster only laughs at his attacks, but notes that Alec has finally realized that the more he thinks, the more he recovers. Alec realizes he must change his strategy, attack more and defend less, and confidently tells the Guildmaster he will no longer be able to recover. Alec insists he must use powerful magic at very close range, but he doesn't know how much mana he has left. Alec knows he has only one shot and will lose if he fails, and remembers that when he went to the dungeons, he could fight for several days. Confident in this, he knows he can give his best here. Rivier asks why he is so inattentive, then strikes Alec with a powerful attack for waiting too long to attack. Alec slips behind the opponent and slices his side with a sword. Rivier dismisses the small cut and strikes at the adventurer again, calling him a weakling. Alec blocks the blow with his sword. Dodging the next attack into the wall, he earns praise from Rivier, who then attacks Alec again, saying he has already lost anyway. The strike looks fatal at first, but Alec manages to use the shield again, and Yora is happy to realize Alec has been waiting for the right moment to use it all this time. She then urges him to attack. Alec drives a single decisive sword blow into River's body. River reels in pain and grits his teeth. Screaming in pain, Rivier pounds the ground after losing an opponent, while Alec moves behind him and prepares to strike that opponent again, reminding Rivier of his own words about losing. Rivier barely turns as another, much weaker blow hits him, and looking at Alec's hand, he sees almost nothing left of his sword except the end of the broken hilt. The Guildmaster stares in confusion as Alec's body suddenly relaxes, and Alec realizes he has just run out of mana and collapses exhausted to the ground. He lies unconscious while your heart watches everything with eager anticipation, waiting for the Guildmaster to speak. But the Guildmaster stays silent and frowns, and just as he is about to announce his verdict, someone interrupts him. A blond man in dark clothes appeared in the arena and said he thought Riviera had just tried to leave, but Riviera was actually in the guild's underground arena doing interesting things. Ornest calls Riviera an old man and says he can no longer call himself an S-rank adventurer. Riviera tells him to shut up as he and Yora stare at the man in disbelief. Turning to Ornest, he says he can't tell him what to do, notes the gap between him and Alex is large, but that Ornest is still pretty good, and adds they can take the pass. Ornest looms over the unconscious Alec, grins, congratulates him on winning this battle, then says Alec can't hear him right now and laughs. Only 4 people remain standing in the arena, which is partly ruined and dust hangs in the air. Yora sat down beside Alec, trying to help him. Ornest grinned and said Yora was ruining all the fun, adding that if she was better than him, he would have joined her group. And Yora said with a straight face, it was strange to hear such words from a man who failed a skill test 4 years ago. And Rivier, he's putting Yorka down. Though he is at that level now, he says he wouldn't be surprised if Alec reached the same level in about 10 years, and a smug smile crosses his face. Ornest laughs, surprised that a friend would say that, and never expected to hear those words from him. Clenching his fists, the young man mocks the Riviera, saying it will be gone by then, given his age, and that he will live a long time. He becomes furious and asks why he spent 10 whole years on Alec when he can now easily defeat Rivera in the same battle. Yora dislikes those words and tells both men to calm down to prevent the conflict from escalating. After a while, all 4 left the arena and went to the house, a lovely wooden building with a simple, cozy interior and a neat, comfortable staircase that led up to the door of a room on the 2nd floor. Alec was still unconscious, his body covered in abrasions and bruises from the last battle, his clothes stained and torn in many places. He was carefully laid on a soft sofa and covered with a blanket over his stomach, and Rivier said the healers had taken good care of him and that he now needed to lie down and rest. The Guildmaster tells the hero to lie down and rest. Yora thanks him and kneels worriedly in front of Alec, waiting for him to wake up honest. Ornest sits relaxed on the same couch at Alec's feet. He admitted he had never expected Alec to become an adventurer, looking down at him with a smug smile. His expression becomes friendlier. He says he's glad and asks how Yora persuaded him. She admits she does not know. He only told her that many things happened at his court. Yora looks a little sad. Rivier sips from a small glass and chuckles, saying he expected nothing else from Galdana's leadership and no niceties toward him since a court magician has no place among commoners. He looks disgusted as he says they like to divide people by ancestry and status, and that one day people will grow tired of it. He says he hopes so, but Rivier disagrees, noting that Alec, as a court magician, has been unable to influence the leadership for 4 years. She suddenly smiles, and Ornest clearly dislikes it, so he snaps at her, asking why she is smiling. Maybe something he said seemed funny to her, but she says it did not, and that she is simply glad everyone here shares the same opinion. The man jokingly grabs your little hat and sticks out his tongue at her, which offends her, while Rivier ignores the prank and says he remembered something during their talk. He asked why Alec decided to become a court magician and even worked there for 4 years. Bornest, relaxed, replies that it was obviously about money. Riviera asks you to explain, and his face shows he clearly expected a different answer. Yora then explains to him that Alec lost his mother as a child and his father had many problems, and recalls Alec as a student who once said with a bright, eager smile that becoming a court magician would make life easier for him and his father. After listening, Riviere sets the glass with its unfinished contents on the table and thinks to himself about how much money Alec needed, so much that he took a job as a court magician and kept it for a long time. Misha rushes in, panicked, and tells the Guildmaster there is a problem, while the girl looks very worried. Yorha asks what happened, but she gives no details, saying only that trouble has come and a Guildmaster is urgently needed. Silence falls as the Guildmaster grabs the edge of her shirt and lifts her small, light body into the air. A turn of events the girl did not expect. Carrying a slightly dazed Misha in one arm, he tells Yorha and Ornest he will step away for a while and, knowing Ornest, asks the four not to touch the alcoholic beverages in the unlocked closet in this room. Yorha asks Ornest what he thinks the guild's problems are. Ornest shrugs and says it was probably another fight or something. Ignoring the Riviera's words, he opened the liquor cabinet and checked its contents, then picked up a bottle and pushed the cork out with his finger. He changes the subject. Ornest drinks from the bottle and says that if either you or she wants, he can tell her something else because he knows a lot. You look slightly sad. After a while and many long talks, Ornest was clearly shocked and upset by what he heard. He tells Yorhav with great emotion that based on her stories, the Crown Prince has gone mad, forbidding everyone but himself to carry weapons, forcing his subjects to carry luggage and making them responsible for it, and even banning the court magician from using any magic. The young man says emotionally that this is wrong, and the Crown Prince must have gone mad, and Yorha, who clearly dislikes it, adds that the Crown Prince finds support magic useless and that she agrees. Ornus admits he didn't know Alec could use support magic. Yorha is surprised and reminds him Alec has used it since studying at the academy. The man asks Yorf if Alec learned support magic from scratch, noting he did not have the ability to do it. Yorha smiles and says it is actually very good because his protective spells are at a very high level. Ornus frowns in displeasure and cannot understand how the Crown Prince could treat Alec that way. Yora says they kicked him out because they did not want him to be seen as such a strong opponent, and Ornus immediately becomes furious. Suddenly, he jumps up and runs to the window, then punches it hard, shattering the glass as fragments fly around the room. Yorhut tried to shield herself from the flying shards, while Ornest was too angry to notice the many small cuts they caused. Alec slowly opens his eyes. After a moment, he regains consciousness, sees the man before him, recognizes him as Ornest, and puzzled asks what he is doing here. What? Anger leaves Ornest's face when he sees Alec has finally come to his senses. The young man asks the hero whether he really has. After a few moments, Alex rises slightly and looks around. He tries to ask you something, but keeps speaking unintelligibly, and she interrupts him, then happily shows him his honestly earned pass. Glad he can now go on adventures with her and her team and explore the dungeon's lower floors, Alec is interrupted by Ornest, who tells him to wait because they have something else to do, which he doesn't understand. In the next second, Ornest's face goes manic as he aggressively declares they must take revenge, show everyone the court magician Galdana's vengeance, and crush the prince's group to dust. Alec covers his face with his hand as he listens and asks Ornest to calm down, saying he is offended but no longer cares about them. Ornest refuses and says they will definitely take revenge. Yorha warns that if they fight another group, they will break the rules and it may end badly for them. Ornest asks what she means, reminding her that the Crown Prince and his group mistreated their friend, And Yora tries to respond, but Alec steps in to calm Ornest himself. He tells him to stop embarrassing their leader and that he is fine. Alec says he is glad to have become an adventurer and no longer wants to remember what happened. Ornest is silent for a few seconds. Smiling, he tells Alec he's glad Alec wants to become an adventurer, because they'll become the best adventurers in the world. Alec doesn't quite understand him, so he stays silent. And Ornest continues his monologue, saying the whole world will know the court magician's power, and their group will reach incredible heights. They will also become popular. Ornest said he was more than satisfied with the arrangement, and had already surrendered himself to his imagination, even beginning to imitate out loud the desperate pleas of lovers, begging him for help and calling him master, while a joyful smile crossed his face and he laughed. Turning to Alec, he says with a smile that he cannot wait, because then he will refuse the prince himself. Alec smiles and adds that if they are the best in the world, they could be even better than the prince's band. In the evening, Rivier was in a room looking at Krista, who sat on the bed covered in wounds and blood, and asked if anyone else had returned besides her. She stays silent, and he says that if the S-rank group couldn't handle it, it's a serious problem. When he asks what happened, she replies, "They need more and stronger people." Riviera looked confused and did not know what to say. Then he said he needed her help with something, and Krista was no longer bleeding and her wounds had been patched up and bandaged. Later, many adventurers gathered in one room, among them Yora, Ornest, Krista, and Rivier. And in the center, a small table held a map and several records and instruments, while Rivier scanned the room and asked where Alec was. Krista asks to confirm that Riviera means Alec Juglet, the magician of the 5 colors. Ornest says he is surprised because he did not expect her to know him, and a girl confirms. Krista remembers hearing Alec beat the 68th floor boss by hitting its 5 heads with different elements. Krista continues her story, saying Alec did not just hit the elements on each head, he hit them all at once. That seemed impossible, so they gave up. Later, they learned one man had done it, and since then he has been called the Magician of 5 Colors. Everyone nearby was surprised by Christus's story about Alec. Rivier noted this nickname was different from the one Alec had at the academy. He even wondered how much he still did not know about Alec. The Magician of the 5 Colors sat in another room holding several sheets of paper, his face and clothes still marked from the last battle, and a voice told him he could not hide and asked why Alec was hiding his face. Alec doesn't respond. Misha, also in the room, waves her hand in front of him because she thinks he didn't hear. She tells him the meeting has already started. Only then does Alec notice her. Alec tells her A-rank adventurers were invited to the meeting, and he is not one of them. Misha replies that Alec may not be ranked, but they'd still be glad to see him there, and he hesitantly asks if she really believes that. After that, Alec remembers his old band, especially how much the Crown Prince tried to separate him from the others, and how Alec always had to apologize for being there. After such an unpleasant experience, Alec decides it is better to avoid others completely, a lesson he learned as a court magician. He knows this is true, but also knows he dislikes it. A gloved hand reached out to Alec, who had closed his eyes. The girl touches his forehead, says he has wrinkles and looks a little older, then calls his name as Alec stares in shock at the familiar figure ahead. He jumps up in surprise after a second and steps back slightly, clearly not expecting to see Claudia, asks in confusion when she arrived, and she says he should stop being so distracted by books, and that Misha told her he was here. Alec felt confused, and had no words after seeing her again after so many years, so he asked Claudia how she was, and she, unsure how to reply, repeated his question with a resigned sigh. After that, she smiles softly at him and tells him he should look at himself, because his appearance makes it clear that not everything is right, and he looks away guiltily, unsure what to say. After that, Claudia points at him and heals Alec. As Alec looks at his healed body, Claudia says she is not interested in where he has been or what he has done. Sa. She asks him to tell her if anything bothers him, since she is skilled in healing magic. Alec is amused by how much his girlfriend worries about his condition. As soon as she sees the wounds, she asks him to contact her. A knock on the door interrupts them. Ornest bursts into the room and Yorker enters, and Ornest is glad the meeting is finally over while Yorker notices Claudia. Ornest reminds Alec he wanted adventure and says they only have an errand from Riviera, whom Ornis calls an old man. At last, the four set off on their first adventure and head to the western dungeon after it was recently attacked. Ornis says that among common people, this dungeon is called the Tank Killer. I ask what this means. Yora explains to him that healing magic does not work in this dungeon, and only potions work. Alec looks at Classia and asks what she is doing with him. Classia, holding back her annoyance, answers that she does not know. She glances at Ornis and says, Olin forced her to go with them and insults him. He asks casually what she objects to and tells her to speak up if she has any complaints. Classia and Ornis exchange harsher words, start fighting openly, and you grab his head and demand his friends calm down, or they will be injured before entering the dungeon. Trying to get Alec's help, she asks him not to ignore her, but he just smiles, and he realizes he has missed this feeling. He asks Yorf why they are going there now that Krista has returned. Yorf explains that although Bloodflower ranked 4th among S-rank groups, the whole team was attacked by a dungeon boss and only Krista came back, so they are going to rescue the others. Ornis, lying on the ground with a large bump on his forehead, says they may not make it because the adventurers are on the 64th floor. Alec thinks for a moment and says they need a core to get through the dungeon floors more comfortably and, most importantly, faster. Yora smiles and says she has one. After rummaging through her backpack, she pulls out a small ball painted with wavy patterns and explains it drops from bosses and lets you skip their battles, so it is essential for any adventurer who wants to go deeper. Yorhasa says they have 52 more of these cores, and Krista has given them her own, so they will be able to reach the 64th floor shortly. Proudly, Classia sat on the defeated Ornis, which lay face down on the ground, and curiously asked Yorf why such a difficult rescue from a dangerous S-rank dungeon was assigned to an A-rank group. She says there are 2 reasons for this. The first is that the Guildmaster himself chose the group for this task. Classia then reminds everyone that Yorhav forgot to mention his cover since he is with them now. Alec smiles and says it's pretty funny, looking cheerful and pleased. Alec meets Classia's eyes. She sees his soft smile and returns it gently. Then he covers his mouth with his hand, slightly embarrassed. Ornis immediately stands up, pleased, and asks what just happened and why Alec is so calm. Alec does not understand what is wrong, and Classia, perplexed, asks why he should be angry. Alec says his skills are much worse than before. The Guildmaster picked only 3 of them, and he realizes he is only a cover because he thinks he should not be around them anyway. Ornis says no one else could be with them but Alec. Since they cannot rely on anyone else, a stronger group needs a powerful magician, and Yora agrees with him. Classia says the Guildmaster will give them the stones and the task only if Alec returns. The 3 of them probably could not have done it. Alec looks surprised, and Classia laughs at his reaction. She adds that the Guildmaster must be counting on him too. Ornis grabs him by the shoulder and says it's time for them to become legendary again. Classia notes, it was quite a long time ago. Yorha agrees, saying she no longer remembers who even said that about them. Ornis resolutely declares that now they have graduated from the academy, it is time to make a name for themselves. 4 adventurers cheerfully announce the start of their endless journey. The group entered this dungeon and reached the lower floors, where a crowd of armed animated skeletons attacked, and Ornis defeated them all with a single powerful spear strike. Grinning, he judged the 64th floor easy as Ornis kept leading with his spear while Yorha followed and burned the monster's remains with her wand. Alec and Classia walked behind them, with Alec noting Ornis is raging again and unchanged since the academy, while Classia examines the weapon and says it is not an ordinary spear, but an Almal Stega that is hard to control. The girl then asks the hero whether he thinks this ancient artifact suits a man like Ornis. I shout to Ornis and ask if I can help, and he agrees, saying he only has to deal with one monster that was trying to stab him with a weak sword at that time. Ornis strikes once with his artifact, completely shattering the monster's body. A few hours earlier, the group had stopped at a safe place to eat. They sat comfortably and ate hot, freshly cooked soup together. When they woke, Yorhaha says that according to rumors, the boss of the 64th floor of the dungeon is the Reaper of Death. She says that no matter what Alec says, he actually helps them a lot. Ornis agrees that it would be hard for them without Alec. Alec, however, does not understand what he has done to help them so much. Ornest adds that their words do not mean they could not have reached this floor without him. Classia agrees, noting Ornest is always eager to fight no matter what, and saying the point is not the floor itself, but whether they can handle the boss. He destroyed the S-rank group in the end, and a sudden sense of danger from behind snapped Alec out of his memories. He spins and fires a lightning bolt at the enemy, his face set on destroying the invisible opponent. As soon as the spell ended, there was no one where Alec had aimed. Classia asks what's wrong with him. Alec looks around and realizes it wasn't his imagination. Alec looks around wearily and says he feels something strange, while Ornest brandishes his spear and asks what Alec means. But Alec only stares silently at the clouds of dust and smoke rising from his attack. After a few moments, a pair of eyes and a faint silhouette appeared and vanished in a puff of smoke. And he finally noticed. At the same moment, Alec picks up a sword. At the same moment, he strikes confidently at the spot where he had seen the silhouette. The others saw that his sword did not pass through the air but met an obstacle. I finally realized his hunch that their enemy was invisible was right, and the Reaper of Death had revealed himself, a monster whose skeleton was covered by a thin layer of skin, dressed in a long torn cloak and holding a large black scythe. Bornst plants himself on the monster's remains and steps confidently before the Reapers, declaring that the dead can rise, and Alec shouts at him not to move ahead because he is risking his safety. The Reaper swings his sight for another strike, but Alec parries with his sword and stands back to back with Ornest. Alec angrily tells Ornest to listen to his warnings at least once and not take any risks. Ornest replies there is nothing to worry about and everything will be fine. He said he had heard of invisible enemies before, but never thought he would meet one. Ornest keeps destroying all monsters with the same confidence, helped by his artifact. He remembers that once a court magician called him a genius, so the magician still has to give him freedom to act. Also, trust is something he has not seen in 4 years. Since then, it has been just words to him. In response to Ornest's words, Alec firmly strikes the Reaper, cutting it in half and irritably telling Ornest to stop working alone. Ornest smiles while watching. Yora looks worried and Classia just watches because she can't help. Alec sees Yora's expression and assumes she found some of his words funny. Yora tries to deny it. Classia joins the conversation and says she wants to scold Alec a little, since Ornest, though not very smart, will not act recklessly. Alec agrees with her. Alec grabs Ornest's outstretched hand to help him up and says he can do whatever he wants, but they will definitely talk when they get out. Ornest laughs and says they need to survive first. Monsters surround the group again. Ornest says irritably the floor is very troublesome. Palacios says the floor is not especially hard, but will take them a long time to clear. Yora says their goal here is salvation, not cleansing. Classy says she knows this, but asks Yora to tell Ornest, who cannot calm down. Ornest says he is not a fool but is just obsessed with cleaning up. He says if they refuse, he will handle it himself and charges into battle, and Alex keeps up and strikes the monsters with a lightning bolt. They finally dealt with all the monsters, at least the ones around them. Classius rummages in her backpack, and Ornest stands with a foot on the monster's remains again and turns to Alec to ask why he always uses a lightning bolt. The latter looks at him in confusion, and Ornest goes on, saying he looks so much like an old man from the Riviera, and asks why he should not use other spells. The question brings back those times for Alec. When he was with the Crown Prince, he kept warning the prince not to face dangerous opponents alone. Alec said he could handle them himself, but the prince did not listen. Alex began using Thunderbolt after that because it takes almost no prep time and is not very visible, so he could use it covertly to protect others. Alec refuses to answer, turns away from Ornest and says they need to move on. Ornest is not satisfied and asks Alec whether he is offended, and Alec replies sarcastically that he is not offended, but simply does not want to talk. A strong tremor sweeps through the dungeon, rattling the floor and walls and interrupting the conversation. The group looks around wearily, unsure where the shaking is coming from. Alec kneels, puts his hand on the floor, and says it's nearby on this floor. Ornest is clearly pleased. He quickly grabs his spear, smiles, and says it will be fun now, then turns to your heart. She understands instantly without words what he wants, says she can't see anyone but agrees to do what Ornest asked. Then he crouches, drops to one knee and puts both hands on the ground as if about to sprint. The group stands side by side so the support magic reaches everyone. As soon as the spell ends, Ornest rushes forward with super acceleration. He pulls far ahead, leaving his teammates behind even though the whole team accelerated. Hot shoe marks appear on the floor where he stepped. Alec is stunned by that power. Yora smiles and says that when Ornest is serious, few can compete with him. Alec says he disagrees with her, crediting Yora's support for who he is and praising her as the group's leader. Yora blushes and scratches the back of her head sheepishly, trying to politely refuse the compliment. At that moment, Classia and Alec both notice something ahead. They ran to a doorway at the end of the corridor and stepped through to a cliff where, in a vast desolate area below, Ornest was inconveniently positioned and a huge, scaly, lizard-like monster was chasing someone. Alex watches what is happening below while the young man fleeing the monster suffocates. The young man mustered the strength to scream, begging Ornest to help him as soon as possible, running with all his might and fearing for his life, while Ornest watched everything calmly, looking at him without a trace of regret and telling him to run faster or the monster would catch him. The young man keeps running from the monster and pleads louder for Ornest to help because he can no longer run, and Alex, confused, asks his friend what is going on. Ornest explains that this young man is Loki's Silperia and has angered the local monsters, and adds that in the Bloodflower, Loki is the biggest problem for their rescue group. Loki takes a deep breath and shouts at Ornest to remember that if Loki dies, he will come to Ornest in his dreams every night. Ornest says Loki has a nickname that shows his unpleasant nature, and Loki adds that after he dies, he will come to Ornest and whisper many nasty things in his ear. While running, he stumbles and falls, and the fall looks like a total failure for a young man. Alec is terrified, convinced Loki will be eaten by monsters, but Classia calms him and explains that Loki uses a fighting style called Loki Grins when he senses a monster approaching. Advancing on the helpless victim, the monster does not notice the magic circle and steps on it. So a powerful magical ray shoots up from the circle and pierces its body as it screams in pain while Loki covers his head with his hands. Alec watches with delight as Loki uses magic to trap the monster. A moment later, the same lasers pierce the monster, passing through its body. Painful screams rise again as Loki laughs cruelly at the creature caught in the trap. Calling the creature stupid, he says he won't encounter it now, and the monster opens its mouth slightly as a magic circle begins to form. The monster opens its mouth wider and wider, making the magic circle grow as it prepares a powerful attack, and Loki watches, realizing he cannot escape or dodge it. So he stares back with a sad smile and does not move, thinking victory was very close. The monster reaches its peak and unleashes a powerful magic beam from its mouth. But a moment before, Ornest manages to carry Loki out of the affected area. Ornest, wearing an annoyed but friendly smile, tells Loki he should thank him properly later, and remembers that he had told Loki to run a little more, which Loki did not do. Loki stayed silent and only smiled at Ornest, sweating all over after running in fear for so long. Ornest adds that he kept his promise and took Loki away. Alec watches the monster. A long, wide trail of destructive magic marked where his massive attack landed seconds earlier. From the monster's stance, it was clear it would not give up, and Alec faced the massive creature without a drop of fear, thinking the game had begun. The scene moves to the 30th floor dungeon under the capital of the Kingdom of Gildan, where the Crown Prince's team on a mission flees two bloodthirsty worm-like monsters, and the Crown Prince wonders why this keeps happening to him. Regulus ran ahead of everyone while Lenny fell behind, and he angrily demanded to know what she was doing and ordered her to use her magic immediately. Panting from running, she tried to answer the prince, but he refused to listen and insisted she use magic no matter what. Ordered to follow this prince, the group's leader, Laziness focuses and summons a magic circle, attempting to cast offensive magic at the monsters. No matter how hard she tries, something stops her. Exhausted, she tells the prince she cannot use attacking magic or any magic at all. The prince, puzzled, asks the reason, but no one can answer him. Eventually, the prince stops and turns toward the monsters. He says they have already come this far, so with no other options, he will use his sword skills to cut down the enemies. The prince resolutely strikes the monster on the head, aiming to finish it in one blow, but the sword only bounces off the monster like a rubber toy. The monster is unharmed. The sword does not even scratch it, and there is no sign of mortal wounds. So for a few moments the prince stands stunned, staring at the creature, unable to understand what happened because he had expected a different outcome. He pauses for a few seconds, watching the frozen prince. The monster stands dazed, unable to grasp what happened. The worm suddenly attacks, driving its head into the ground with all its might in front of the crown princes, creating a shockwave that sends the prince flying backward onto his back, and Lenny runs up excitedly to make sure his highness is not hurt. With the prince injured, she takes command and orders the group to lift his wounded body and keep fleeing the monsters. One member hoists him above his head and keeps running. Wounded and crippled, the prince, now with a large bump on his forehead, thought about how it happened. He can't understand how this happened at all, since he used to defeat monsters instantly and his defense was flawless. Now he can hardly hold a sword in his hands. The prince cannot understand what changed in him. Then he suddenly realizes that everything went wrong after he kicked that magician out of his group and stripped him of his title as court magician. After a little reflection, he concludes the magician is to blame for everything and cursed him in revenge. Alec stands on the edge of a cliff, watching a massive monster appear before him, a lizard-like creature whose scales resemble thick armor, catching the light and giving off heavy smoke. I manage to react when the monster lifts its massive limb into the air and strikes with devastating force at the spot where he, his group, and Loki were standing. Alec manages to raise his shield, and Yora, standing behind him, also tries to shield herself with her wand from the monster's attacks. After repelling the attack, Alec uses his thunderbolt on the monster. There is no time to say the spell's name as the monster runs past him and ignores them completely. Confused, Yora assumes the monster has escaped, but Alec turns, sees which way it is running and that it is not running away, and calls Ornis's name so Ornis notices the approaching threat. Alex yells for him not to drop Loki and to run. Ornis reacts in time, grabs Loki with one arm and sprints away from the monster. With the monster distracted, Alex takes his chance. Alec fires a thunder charge at the monster. Yor says the hit connected on the fast-moving creature, but Alec does not celebrate because the monster does not slow down. Ordnance turns to watch the monster chasing them. Realizing he had been completely oblivious to Alex's attack, he kept running after his victim as clouds of smoke peeled from his armor. Ornist grins without a trace of fear and calls the monster persistent. Classia, seeing its size and resigned, calls him an idiot. Seconds later, she screams as she realizes Ornist is running toward them, leading a giant monster. Ornist doesn't slow down, grabs Loki with one hand and throws him toward his friends, and Loki lands by chance right on the angry Classia in a very embarrassing position that angers her more, and she insults him while he lies motionless on top of her, blushing deeply. Ornis grabbed his artifact and charged straight at the monster without hesitation, shouting for it to attack as he headed into its giant open mouth. Deciding to attack Ornist from above, he quickly raises his massive paw and slams it down to crush Ornist under his weight. While Ornist distracts the monster, Yorha and Alec hold it back so Classia and Loki can leave safely. Loki cannot move quickly on his own, so Classia takes him by the shoulder and drags him along. Ornist refuses to give up now, dodging the monster's furious attacks with quick, skilled moves and moving to its flank so it loses sight of him. Ornist clung to a chain around the monster's neck with one hand and held his artifact in the other, staying calm and warning the monster it would regret being hacked later. Dangling from the monster's chain, Ornist checks on his companions by asking how they are. Yorha shouts so he can hear from afar that Loki is safe, then tells Ornist to leave quietly and move away from the monster while she and Alec hurry to finish it, urging him along. After that, Yorha stands beside Alec and they ready themselves to take down the monster in one blow, lifting her wand as magic gathers around her and her hair and cloak flutter in the strong magical wind. Yorha concentrates fully and applies increases to strength, endurance, speed, flexibility, dexterity, the five senses, and magic to Ornis. Ornist runs at full speed, seizes the moment, jumps onto the monster's head and drives his spear through its thick armor into its skull. The monster screams in fierce pain as Ornest pulls the spear free and a thick fountain of liquid pours from the wound. He grabs a chain to stop his fall, but the old rusty link snaps and he plunges downward. The monster sees him flying and immediately strikes Ornest, preventing him from hitting the ground. He cannot resist and is thrown violently to the side. The impact causes multiple abrasions, open wounds, and likely fractures. Yora is terrified when she sees what happened to her friend and comrade and wants to protect him because he can no longer fight. But the monster stops her. After Ornesto, it focused on Yora and tried to crush her with a massive paw. But Yora reacted in time and formed a round shield around herself, which the monster then covered with its paw. Yora struggles to hold the shield, silently urging Alec to hurry, while Loki, already awake and watching, finally says he cannot believe his eyes. Turning to Klasya, who is still helping him walk away from the battle's center to a safer spot, he asks whether what he imagined or what he sees is real, but Klasya does not understand and asks what he means. Loki says he meant that their old team is back together after 4 years. Loki looked at Alec as he spoke, and Alec was gathering his thoughts, focused only on what he needed to imagine, draw, and picture in his mind. Closing his eyes, he focused only on his thoughts, tuning out events and sounds, thinking he must never stop, and realizing it was thanks to Yorhaha that he was here now, and that he owed her a great deal. Alex knows and firmly believes he must protect her and his group, his friends and comrades who also cherish him very much. He spreads his arms and thinks again that he cannot stop. All his thoughts are focused only on imagining, deducing, drawing, and depicting. Loki smiles and lets out a short laugh and calls Alec a very dangerous opponent. Drawing 3 magic circles makes a magician very skilled. Drawing 5 marks him as a genius. Alec could draw an incredible number of circles. Ornest found the strength to stand and struck the monster's tail with his spear, pinning it to the ground. The monster let out a monstrous orange scream. Ornest wonders how many circles the hero has created. Ornest reminds the monster of his own words, that the monster should not be offended when Ornest starts to chop him up, and adds that it is pointless to say anything since the monster will die anyway. Alec waves his arms like an orchestra conductor, and the spell takes effect. Those countless magic circles unleash lightning bolts at once after Alec used spell copying. Alec's actions made it possible to create so many circles. The giant monster's body is pierced instantly by hundreds of bolts with no chance of survival. Magic circles formed around the huge monster on the battlefield as Alec stood inside a protective shell amid clouds of steam and light, and cast thunderbolt magic with his spell-copying skill. Frowning in the blinding light of the lightning, Alec believes he succeeded because he created more than 25 circles and cast a spell on them. Years. He is sure that after such a thing, the monster should not even have the strength to move. The hefty monster suddenly bolts away from the spell he created, and Alec freezes in shock. Alec is surprised by how much strength and endurance this seemingly clumsy monster has, allowing it to leave the electric field so easily. Facing the monster's toothy mouth, Alec moves quickly to the magician's side, stays outwardly calm and confident, drops into a fighting stance, folds his arms to strike, and waits for the horned creature because he is not finished with it yet. Mud-streaked bone classist shouted for Klasya to tie up the monster. A short distance away on the battlefield, she raised her weapon to strike the horned monster. Klasya habitually tells Onesta not to scream, since she knows what to do, and picks up her bow, nocks an arrow, pulls the string, and focuses to hit the target. Klasya called down a rain of arrows as a huge magic circle flashed above the monster. Arrows surge from the magic circle toward the monster and strike it at lightning speed, embedding themselves in its skin. The arrows make the monster scream, and now your hero steps forward to attack. Smiling, she raises her magic staff. Yorha casts a binding spell and glowing chains appear from all sides, wrapping a huge monster with burning eyes and arrows sticking out of its skin, and she hopes the bonds will hold it. Yora's bonds hold the monster and it roars. Seeing the enemy bound, he swings his weapon and throws it hard. The blow hits the monster, and it screams that the big guy got his way. The monster is still not defeated and clearly ready to attack the heroes. Suddenly, new magic circles appeared one after another. Alec used the 4-sided battle seal to surround the monster and stood in a fighting stance. Gathering all its strength, the monster lets out a powerful roar and a bright flash of light, breaks the bonds on its toothy mouth, and easily repels Alex's 4-sided battle seal. Alec stands in a defensive stance, covering himself with his hands. The monster is very strong. Alec stares at the monster in amazement as it keeps emitting strange sounds. The sounds carry across the battlefield to Loki, who sits awkwardly behind a small hill and stares intently at Alec's fight with the monster. Alec stands before the roaring monster as the roar ripples his clothes and hair, amazed by how tenacious it is. He thinks it won't last long. Alec reaches toward the monster, preparing another attack. Alec silently hopes his new attack will definitely work. At the same time, he remembers a blonde man asking another man if he was interested in magic. The other man's face is hidden by his bangs, but he is smiling slightly. In front of a brick wall, a black-haired teenager holding fishing gear stands before a blonde man and looks at him in surprise. Alec remembers that he was the one who told him about the special magic. A hand makes a slow, magical motion, and Alec Eglet knows only two people at Galdana Academy naturally had that unique magical gift, one whose genius he respects and the other is a different person. This is Alec from his own memories. The scene returning to the battlefield where the monster suddenly fired a powerful light strike at him, and he immediately formed a reflective shield that repelled the attack. The force of their fight sent air currents in every direction. One of them nearly knocked your HUD off, but she planted her staff in the ground and held on, squinting because this was the reflection spell that made Alec famous at the academy. Alec raises his hand in a defensive move and stands firm against the monster's blows. Flashes of light and gusts of air whip around him across the battlefield. Alec Eglet is remarkably strong. Alec suddenly charged toward the monster without hesitation, and she now wants to know more about her teammate. Her clothes and hair flew as she ran. On the defensive, Alec confidently called on Helios to burn the monster down, and 4 magic circles formed around it as a column of fire began to pulse, rising and twisting until the flames completely enveloped the monster. A powerful scream rings across the battlefield as the monster slowly loses strength in the fire from Alec's spell, and Alec stands nearby watching silently, confident in his magic. A bright fire devours the dungeon monster, engulfing it completely so it is nearly invisible in the smoke and flames. Alec stands quietly, watching as his flame destroys it. Seeing the monster defeated, Alec turned and began to walk calmly away from the battlefield. Suddenly, the defeated monster moved its huge paw toward the magician, and Alec turned back. Onist launches a combat jump onto the moving monster and swings his weapon to deliver a deafening blow to end the fight. But the monster still reaches for Alec with its creepy paw. With a powerful blow, Onist expertly severs the head of the monster lying on the ground from its body. He lands solidly on both feet after the attack. Alec, delighted and surprised by the sudden move, smiles at Onist. He ate, grimaced, and said he had his own scores to settle with the monster. Alec is grateful to Onist for his support, and Onist says Alec did very well, though nothing less was expected of either of them. But do the guys all say together that they are geniuses? Yora and Klasia laugh after hearing the conversation. Yora praises the men for their good work, and Klasia adds that Alec and Onist will now work for 4 honest objects, believing the girls did nothing during the battle. The scene moves to a coastal street lined with low, neat stone houses, where a black-haired teenager waves to a blonde man in a raincoat who walks along the waterfront to meet him. The mood is peaceful. In the dark, someone hears instructions to focus and breathe slowly, and when that happens, they should begin to open their eyes slightly. On the street, a blonde man stands behind a black-haired teenager, holding his shoulders and ordering him to act, and the teenager stretches out his arms, shouts the attack's name, and fires a shot of fiery spikes. Fiery spikes hit the suspended round target dead center. Smoke rising, and a black-haired teenager clenches his fists with joy because he did everything perfectly. Eldas, the blonde man, listens as the teenager happily boasts that he has finally succeeded. Nearby, several round targets hang from a crossbar, still burning and smoking, and Elbidas sees perfectly well though the targets are hit. The black-haired teenager says today's spell was difficult, and is very glad he managed to learn it in just one day, smiling contentedly while Elsidas agrees but points out people usually take a month or more to learn it. Encouraged by how quickly he manages, the teenager wants to learn more from LDS. Elzida says that's enough for today, and they will continue their studies tomorrow. He slowly puts on his raincoat. The view shows the sky and the roofs of neat stone houses. The teenager is upset about the end of classes and whines, and Elcites comforts him, says he needs rest too, and invites him to go fishing instead of studying. Ripples spread outward from the fishing line in the water. The teenager stares at the surface and, through clenched teeth, says he wants to know more spells, and Elpitis, whose face has finally emerged from under his hair, remains thoughtfully silent. The black-haired teenager is Alec, as expected. Alec and Eldos sit back-to-back by the water, each holding a fishing rod. Elgatus calls Alec by name and says he has a natural talent for magic. Alec looks surprised at Elgatus. Closing his eyes, Elcites says calmly that Alec will become an excellent magician even without his teaching, so he can afford to go with the flow. He seems a little tired of thinking. Alec stares at his teacher Elbatus in disbelief, finding it strange that Elbatus is now teaching him all kinds of magic spells. View of a platform by the water surrounded by trees. Elidus tries to speak, but a fish pecks at him, prompting a joyful call to Alec asking how his fishing rod is doing. But Alec says he does not understand because he has never fished before. Elcidas and Alec had a busy life in the city. Elcidas diligently taught Alec magic, and in summer they fished and enjoyed their catch, while in winter they built snowmen and tossed snowballs. A view of the sky and treetops, a street by the water, Alec and Elba standing before him. Alec feels sad because his teacher and friend Elba is leaving the capital, and they will probably never see each other again. A handsome Elbitus smiles sadly and looks slightly to the side. He warns young Alec never to become a court magician, and adult Alec remembers that these were the parting words of his teacher Elcites. Alec Eglic stands at the table of books and remembers that when he entered the Academy of Magic, he learned his teacher Elzatus had graduated from there. Elzatus was top of his class and became a court magician, but he is gone now. An ally could never forget the face of teacher Elgatus. It was sad and lonely, and even his voice sounded desperate to Alec. He remembered telling his academy team he wanted to become a court magician and leave them. Action returns to the present, and someone claps their hands. Loki has recovered from the battle and now addresses the legendary group, looking quite handsome. The whole group stands before him as Loki asks if the magician standing here is a court magician. Loki knows all about them, and with a slight smile, says the court magician killed the Hydra, which Loki thought was fiction, but Alec corrects him, saying he is no longer a court magician. Loki is shocked and asks what happened, and Alec does not want to talk. Loki, squinting at the others in his usual way, explains how Alec thinks and why Galdana's nobility let him off service so easily without detaining him, something Alec had been thinking about. Meanwhile, Loki has already turned to York. He thanks her warmly for rescuing him and rushes in to hug her, promising that he and their group's leader will repay her. York, unhappy with the attention, tells Loki to leave her alone. Loki, still smiling, asks if Alex's team has any potions and whether they will share them on the test, then makes a face and asks why they should share anything with him or show such generosity. Loki, grinning mysteriously as usual, tells the others the fight is not over yet and that the floor boss is waiting for them ahead. Honest grows serious and frowns, asking Loki what he just said. Alec and Honest are shocked because normally a dungeon floor has only one boss, and that rule has never been broken before. Then Loki retorts, asking them where he got that data and why he is still alive. Clausia looks at Loki thoughtfully and wonders if she should destroy him right now, while Loki smiles ingratiatingly and tries every way to persuade her because he has poured his whole soul into his plea when someone suddenly splashes liquid in his face. Loki stands frozen, too shocked to speak, as liquid drips from his face and hair. Next to him, Honest stands holding a stone mine and a vessel, smiles cunningly, and is the one who splashed the potion Loki had wanted so much. Loki smiles and says he always knew he was the best. Parst gets angry and demands Loki talk about the case. Alec asks her what's wrong with them. She replies oddly that Loki and Aknis behave like this every time they meet. Classia steps into the dispute between Loki and Honest and demands Loki talk about a different boss. She is not joking, and Loki understands. Sweating slightly, he smiles and agrees to the story. Loki goes instantly businesslike and composed and tells the surprise team the new floor boss is as dead as the first. But he is fully armored and no one is alive inside the sinister armor with a horned helmet and chains. Closia clarifies that it is not a dead man, but a living armor. Loki remains unsure. All he understands is that the new boss is not affected by physical attacks, and he turns to the surprised Alec. Loki suddenly gives Alec a small, nondescript magic staff like a wand, and, with a steady smile, says he can only entrust this valuable item to Alec. Alec is surprised, and at first cannot tell what the object is, though he may have guessed its purpose. And meanwhile, Loki says he is sure Alec fights well with weapons, so he should use it when the boss gets closer. Loki says Alec should have no problems fighting the floor boss one-on-one if Alec has this item with him. Loki briefly recalls Alec's recent powerful attack on his former boss and is sure he will cope. Alec still doubts Loki's judgment and asks why Loki is so confident. Loki smiles and says his class is support magic, so he's just doing his job. And with this artifact, Alex will definitely defeat the boss. The artifact in Alex's hands suddenly sparkled and became a sword. It was Schwarz's sword, a blade that cuts through the earth and the heavens. Now it belongs to Alex, and he stares at the beautiful weapon in amazement. The Adventure Seekers team is not happy. One member frowns, thinks Loki is acting suspiciously. Yora agrees and, looking serious, asks Loki what he's up to and why he's sending Alec to fight the boss. Loki folds his fingers by his face and eyes his companions slyly, then tells Yora directly that he gave Alec an artifact to see exactly how strong Alec Exiled is in close combat without magic. Classia is also very surprised because plain force without magic cannot destroy the undead, especially the floor boss. So Loki's claim that Alec cannot use magic makes no sense, and Loki laughed. Loki stands before Honest, Yorka, Classia, and Alec, who still holds the artifact named the Schwarz Sword, and laughs smugly as he tells the group he really likes such vivid performances. Loki is rightfully a master of planning battles, intrigues, and actions. The whole team of heroes fell for Loki's tricks. Smiling cunningly, Loki believes they have no choice but to do exactly as he planned. Loki, after finishing his speech, folds his arms and stands in front of Alec and the others, clearly pleased with himself, and Alec explains he really won't be able to use magic in a boss fight. I agree that ancient relics might help, but they must face a deadly spirit that is not physical. Loki asks whether Alec heard what he just said. Suddenly, Honest holds out his hand and asks Loki what he knows about Alec. Poking Loki in the forehead with his finger reminds Loki that he is nobody here and has no authority here. And Loki remains calm and asks Honest to stop pushing him so hard. Loki looked ahead confidently, removed Honest's hand from his face, asked everyone to calm down and listen carefully again, and reminded them he wasn't asking the team to avoid using magic for the whole fight, only during the boss fight. Yora studies Loki's words, trying to understand what the treacherous god just said, and concludes he probably wants the team to treat Alec as a swordsman rather than a magician, and to use him as a combat member in the next battle. Loki again avoids a direct answer, saying he will not force them to do anything against their will, but asks the team to fight with the help of an artifact called Schwarz's Sword, and will give no further orders until he signals them. Loki says the team must finish the boss fight with a magic strike. He asks Alec if everything is clear, and Alec looks thoughtfully at the sword still in his hands. Suddenly, Alec agrees and Loki is pleased. A bird's-eye view of the whole team. Loki leaves Alec near Classia and asks her for a little magic. Classia repeats the question even though he already confirmed he needs magic, because he does not want to search a large dungeon on foot. Loki winces and says he needs spatial magic, which uses a lot of mana, and he can't do it alone. Classia chuckles skeptically, clearly not believing him. Classia stands next to Honest and Yora and gloomily explains that spatial magic is a state secret. He is surprised by the seriousness of the question. Yora pretends not to hear anything, and only Loki laughs contentedly, thinking everything is fine. Loki goes through his usual routine, gives a thumbs up, and confidently declares that no one will ever know about it, while Classia, Yora, and Honest look at him gloomily and incredulously and remain silent, not daring to say anything else to this cunning Loki. A top-down shot shows the whole team of heroes. Loki steps forward and tells them he is now as guilty as everyone else, and the team falls silent, weighing his words and unsure how to respond. Feigning warmth, Loki hugs Klasia and Onesta on the shoulders, and seeming resigned, says that from now on he is in the same boat with them, and therefore they should all try hard together. Klasia and Onest are in a stupor from what is happening. Once they recover, Klasia and Onest almost at the same time land a couple of punches on the annoying Loki, push him aside and step back a little. Alec quietly tells Yorha to blame Loki if anything goes wrong later, and Yorha agrees. Loki draws a magic circle on the ground. Osnes stands beside him, looking bored. Klausia sits next to Loki, listening as he explains the circle's features, and Belek turns to Yorha to ask her something. Laughing, Loki does not hear Yorha and Alec, holds the Schwarz Sword artifact in his hands and glances sideways at Loki, while Alec asks Yorha how much a man like Loki can be trusted, calling him suspicious, noisy, and more. Yorha paused, as if remembering something important, and said that 2 years ago in the Arcadian dungeon, famous for its difficulty, Loki was the raid commander, and during that campaign he lost no men. Yorha smiles at Alec and says that although Loki does not seem reliable, the incident speaks volumes, and Alec smiles back, thinking that because Yorha is so confident in Loki's abilities, he definitely believes her. Alec suddenly shouts and calls Onest, who is standing nearby and looks bored, and Onest turns around, surprised by his colleague's shout to see what Alec is up to again. Alec grins broadly by the goal, folding his hands in a joking pose and offering a challenge to fight with swords since they haven't had that in a long time. And one Karist woke instantly, laughed with joy, and was inspired by the idea Alec had presented. Alec suddenly broke into playful teasing, showing he had not practiced for a long time but would not let him down, belligerently telling him to try his best. And you notice that even though 4 years have passed, the guys have not changed. Bone Nelicist, reverting to his old bully self, blurted that he did not like what Yorha was saying, and Alec added that they needed to go deeper into the dungeon and that training was important because it would give them a reason to look forward to this event. Delighted, he praises Alec, saying Alec knows exactly how to have fun, and Alec, flattered by the praise, agrees with her while Yorha, listening to the guys praise each other non-stop, oddly closes her eyes and presses her hand to her head. When Alec talks about a sword fight, someone asks if he remembers the rules, since the first to fall loses. Alec adds that the loser also pays a fine, and the men laugh loudly. Alex laughs and says that if he wins the fight, he'll have to ask Klasia again to decide who will win. A dignitary shouts that Alec seems to have forgotten how hard it was for him last time. Loki smiles at the noisy couple. He smiles quietly and remembers it has been about 4 years since they started working together, and their friendship does not seem to be fading as Klasia makes magical gestures with her hands and believes it, even though they only met not long ago. Smiling thoughtfully, Klasia says Loki is still mysterious and cannot believe he alone could handle the boss of an entire floor, meaning the bosses are likely too strong for a single player. Loki smiles, pleased, and thinks Klosia-chan is very smart, offering to teach her more magic if she wants. Klosia replies gloomily that if Loki calls her Chan again, she will punch him. Loki laughs but understands everything. A wide view of the hills and steam clubs shows Alec and his team as Loki creates a magic circle, with Klasia helping and the others standing around watching the magic form. Yorha is delighted by the sight of spatial magic. Alec is also impressed, and had not known this magic could be used without advancing to the next level. They both watch Loki closely to see what he does next. Loki is flattered by the attention and delight of you and Alec, and says with his usual smirk that this is not free-flight magic but a spell that moves a person to a place he has marked. The muscular Honest holds his deadly weapon. A voice tells everyone to stay alert and be ready to fight at any time. Yorha and Alec listen closely, and it is probably Loki's voice. Someone says there is a powerful opponent they must beat. He often missed things and asks his colleagues about them. Klasia describes the mood before the boss fight. This is when you need to grab weapons, sword items, and get ready. Alec smiles as he listens to the guys chatting cheerfully. Loki jokes that only Honest is not preparing because he thinks he is a genius and the perfect team member, and Bonest immediately fires a barb back at Loki. Yorha asks them to keep it down. Alec suddenly shuts his eyes and focuses hard. His clothes and hair flutter as if blown by wind, and bright light shines all around his body. The teleport command sounds, starting the adventure. The scene moves to the capital of the Kingdom of Gardana, showing towers and neat stone houses set among high mountains and leafy trees, and a small window where someone calls another a liar. Before a stern fireplace, a man in a black robe stands in the center of the room, holding a magic staff, likely a sorcerer, while another man beside him shouts, calls him a liar, and demands an immediate answer. His Highness sits on the couch, head bandaged and arm in a sling, shouting at the man in front of him. The prince insists this is not a misunderstanding, and that he is not to blame. The famous sorcerer before him clearly made a mistake. The robed man the prince called a sorcerer calmly says he is merely stating that no one has cast any spells on the prince. The prince screams and orders him to be silent at once. As always, the prince is impatient and keeps shouting at the sorcerer, convinced he was cursed and blaming the cowardly commoner Alec Eglet for all his troubles. The prince paused, bit his finger, and decided it was impossible. Otherwise, he would not have stayed at this level so long. The sorcerer hesitated, and asked whether anything on the level could neutralize magic. The prince did not understand what he meant. The sorcerer tells the prince there is a spell on the 30th level of the King's Landing dungeon that strips all magic, even auxiliary amplification, and believes it explains the prince's defeat. The prince thought about it. The prince suddenly had a brilliant idea and loudly declared that this auxiliary magic is what cowards use as salvation, his face showing deep contempt. The prince thinks it does not concern him, but he suddenly remembers how heavy his sword has felt in battle, how he could barely lift it, and how he could not see a way to defeat that terrible monster with a single blow. His Highness the Prince stopped shouting and calmed down a bit, rubbing his chin as he thought again, trying to figure out what it was and, if it was not a curse, what that person had done to him. It's odd. The source decides to ask the prince which Alec he means. One member of the legendary student group conquered the 68th level, and perhaps the prince is referring to that Alec. Annoyed, the prince tried to speak but only made a sound. Laughing, he said these were commoners' tales because he believed commoners are all deceivers by nature, which the sorcerer apparently did not know. Smug and plotting again, the prince insists no one will get away with it, and that he will make that man pay for his deeds, refusing to admit he caused the troubles. The prince casually removes the bandage from his arm and asks the man beside him whether His Majesty has sent for him. His head is still bandaged from his wounds, and one arm is bandaged, but he keeps walking briskly down the hall. The prince walks through the vast hall with his servant, who says His Highness is right, expecting they want to speak about Alec Eglet, the former court magician. He smiles with quiet confidence, sure his father finally agrees with him. From behind the huge palace, the brothers-in-law hear the prince's scream, and Prince Doffet says that insulting him is the same as insulting the kingdom, warning that failing to punish an offender properly will destroy the royal family's reputation. A vast, nearly empty throne room with heavy curtains and a stained glass window at the center of the hall. Near the window, on a stepped platform, sits a stern throne. Beside it, a large man in a raincoat has his back to the person entering. The man on the throne is motionless and silent. A cloaked man with a fur collar and a rose on the back of his robe turned to openly watch the prince walking toward the throne and cut an impressive figure, while the prince greeted His Majesty and believed he could see through everything and everyone. Overly confident and arrogant, the prince already asks His Majesty to place a reward on that man's head, and imagines his tearful face. A loud, deliberate laugh comes from the prince. His Majesty remains silent. A sudden rustle of robes follows. The king turned around abruptly, his robe fluttering as it revealed fine clothes and a tall, well-built frame, then faced the prince and calmly asked if he had ever heard the name Eldas Mayara. The prince fell silent at last, slightly surprised, and obediently told the man he had never heard of anyone with that name in his life. His Majesty slowly sat on the throne and remembered that more than 10 years had passed since that event. The man on the throne has blonde hair and a thick beard, and without looking at the prince, he remembers the other man was the court magician he, as ruler, had banished from the city because the man was a complete idiot. The prince fell silent, not understanding what is happening and waiting for the story to continue. His Majesty says calmly that El Sadas, while at court, openly expressed displeasure with the king's title. El Sadas is a determined young man with one eye darker than the other, dressed in fine clothes and holding a staff, and he urges everyone to change the court's status quo, or Gardana will be in trouble later. His Majesty recalls the nobility disliked such an offer from El Fides. The prince interrupts sarcastically, saying exile was only natural because El Fides had shamefully disrespected royal authority and traditions. His Majesty does not laugh. He tells the prince that after losing his family name and rank at court, the former noble El Sidas became a commoner and then went to the Academy of Magic for help. He silenced everyone with his abilities, used his privilege as the first graduate, and returned to court not as a nobleman, but as a court magician. His Majesty chuckled. With a loud, forced laugh, His Majesty asked the prince whether he thought a man like El Batus a fool. A year later, El Sedis returned to court but was again censured for his speeches. The prince remained silent and listened. Remembering El Sedis's face, the king recalled his words that commoners are not trivial people and that they had saved him, because lately those words kept coming back for no clear reason. His Majesty leans back on the throne and rubs the bridge of his nose as if speaking is hard, then asks whether the prince understands why he, the Dauphi, the son of Regulus, was given the same order to attack the dungeon and its monsters. The prince assumed he was sent there only so His Majesty could check whether he had clear achievements in the dungeon, but the king said he only wanted to be sure he was right and did not say what he meant. Suddenly, the prince hears that the situation requires change in the kingdom, leaving him terrified and unsure what changes are meant. His Majesty believes that, first of all, it is necessary to change the system for appointing commoners. His Majesty, glaring at his son, says talented people in the kingdom should be given positions regardless of status, mentioning Alec Eglet as an example. The prince was speechless and completely shocked by his father's words. The prince hesitates and objects, saying future generations would be ashamed to rely on help from commoners, and reminds his father that the ruler himself taught him this. The prince loses patience and screams in horror, calling his father to look at him because he is the best proof nerd, believing he suffered greatly because of the commoners his father is now talking about, and urges his father to think about and understand it. A servant brought the prince a tray of papers and asked him to take them. The prince studies the tray with pleasure but cannot tell what the dirty, crumpled paper is. He thinks it contains something important about the dungeon. His Majesty looks down at his son and explains that this is the Alec's memorandum, which describes the area's monsters and the techniques and items that must be mastered, and that it is impossible to record all of this in just a couple of attempts, leaving the prince in shock. The prince's hands tremble as he holds stained sheets with neat notes from former court magician Alec Eglet about the dungeon and its dangers, and he angrily crumples them into a fist as if they were garbage, clearly unhappy. Tired of talking about the commoners and Alec Eglet, the prince tells his father he feels ill and that his whole body aches, then turns, gives a cold apology, and quickly leaves the throne room. The prince collapsed to his knees in his chambers, clearly having a panic attack, unable to understand what was happening. His face twisted in horror at his father's words in the throne room, and his whole world ready to crack at the seams. Kneeling, the prince tries in vain to sort the information he has, cannot make sense of what is happening or what it means, and believes his father meant none of those things. The prince remembered the trip he and Alec Eglet took to a dungeon, and back then, when they were in the same group, Alec tried to give him advice, but the prince ignored him and ordered Alec never to speak to him again. Remembering Alec Eglet's pitying eyes, the prince could not stand it and shouted that Alec would not look at him like that. Then, while holding a vase of flowers, he angrily threw it against the wall, shattering it into small pieces. The prince puffs furiously, his face still twisted with anger and confusion as he sits on the floor among the pieces of a broken vase. He had thought Alec Eglet useless, but now he is not sure he himself was any use. The prince quickly decided he could not be incompetent. It was absurd that he was a prince, but the former court magician, Alec Eglet, was not worth talking about. Searching for an excuse, the prince grew angry again. Overcome by rage and tears in his chambers, the prince repeats Alec Eglet's name again and again, involuntarily recalling his face and screaming, convinced this must be some kind of terrible joke rather than reality. A magic circle opened in space and people began to appear from it. Alec leapt out first with a sword and started looking around. Yora and Clash land right on top of Ali, their weight pressing down. Loki stepped out gracefully from the magic circle above the ground. And for some reason, the circle landed directly on Alec Eglet, pinning him to the floor with Loki's foot, and knowing Loki, this may have been on purpose. The adventurer team suddenly hears loud noises and sees bright flashes to their side. And Alec and Yora turn around ready for the worst, focused but not at all scared. With a haughty expression, Loki was not surprised by the sounds and believed everything had gone as usual, even too perfectly, because standing in front of them was someone he expected. The guys and a stranger in front of them stood in the middle of a huge hall lined with stone, with statues and niches here and there, and a gate or door visible in the distance. Right in front of Alec and Loki stood a huge figure with a sword. Dressed all in black, she wears a horned helmet with glowing eyes visible beneath it. In a dungeon corridor stands a huge humanoid monster in a horned helmet, carrying a long sword, wearing armor covered in chains and a fur cape meant for someone else, regretting that it did not work here either. Blood drips from the dungeon corridors onto the floor. This huge monster is the floor boss, and escape is impossible because it will catch up to you. Someone clearly made a big mistake this time. The scene shows Krista, one of the members of the team that Alec must save, and his friends are ordered to tell the guild they need at least an A rank, and someone likely sent a girl specifically to report what was happening. In the dungeon corridors, a young man and a girl stand as two of the 4 team members asking Krista to deliver an urgent report to the guild, while Loki handles the rest and sets out to find powerful magicians, and Krista promises to do everything she can. A black-haired girl and a blonde young man are fighting a huge monster in a horned helmet while Krista and Loki handle their part. They will definitely survive. The young man is clearly injured but holding on with all his strength. The floor boss is a monstrous, impressive figure, armored head to toe with a horned helmet, glowing eyes, and a huge, 2-handed sword he swings with ease. The floor boss raises his sword and brings it down with all his might at the black-haired girl, who is injured but focused and parries as their swords cross and collide. The monster's strike hit too hard, her hands are shaking and the sword is slipping from her grip. A blonde young man shouts at her and fires a magical blast at the monster to give the girl time to retreat. The warrior's girlfriend is named Mabel. It is very hard for him. Their magic is not enough. It is useless against the terrible monster that easily destroys everything around with its huge weapon. Mabel runs to the young man, then pulls back, which is the right move because the floor boss is very dangerous. A voice suddenly shouted for everyone to clear a path to the battlefield. Callus appears and, like a hurricane, delivers a powerful blow to the floor boss as it runs toward him, while Mabel dodges attacks from Honest and the monster and watches the fight. Honest appears suddenly, startling Mabel and the blonde young man, and again strikes the boss's arm with a powerful blow from his weapon. S grins and says he is still a very strong boss, and even seems to enjoy it. Alec appears and says these bosses can only be attacked together. As he speaks, he has already leapt and is ready to hit the armor on the big floor boss. The heroes arrive just in time to help. Alec watched the boss's strange, ball-like twisting strikes and suddenly seemed to grasp the boss's strength, his face showing surprise and realization, but that was not accurate. Alex swings Schwarz's sword in a difficult blow that should have struck the monster cleanly, but the monster reacted instantly and dodged Alex's strike using skills Alex barely understands. Alex shouts in disbelief that this cannot be, because the seemingly clumsy boss sprang up, planted his foot on the ground, stood upright, and was ready to fight. The monster gives Alec and Honest no break and keeps striking hard and fast, one blow after another. It spins on its axis and successfully repels both Alex and Honest's attacks with its powerful sword. This floor boss is very dangerous. Alec took another blow from the enemy's sword and parried with Schwarz's blade, but the boss's strike was so powerful that he shut his eyes and gripped the sword with both hands, clearly struggling to hold back the force. Exhausted, Owen Karist barely has time to raise blocks to shield himself from the monster's lightning strikes, placing them around him, and he smiles maliciously as his anger grows. but it is clearly as hard for him as it is for Alec. Another powerful blow from the monster's huge sword slams into Alec Beck, and he staggers back, fighting to stay upright. Sparks, dust, and stone fragments scatter across the area as the weapons clash. The floor boss is brutal. Alec suddenly realized from the monster's movements that the floor boss was not human, not an animal, and not a living being. After fending off another brutal strike from the monster, Alec shouts that he is not joking, and that the huge suit of armor with the horned helmet is completely empty. On seems to understand what Alec means and thinks they should verify that no human is inside the dungeon boss's armor, so Onst immediately lunges with his weapon at the monster to hit him. The monster reacts instantly, trying to dodge Onus's blow with his usual twisted technique to regroup or rush to the side with his help. Onus is on guard and not fooled, and he laughs. Old Manist charges the monster, which is still mid-move, shouting that this dodge trick is nothing new on Gestrist, swinging his spear as he prepares to strike the monstrous boss. Honest clearly did not mean to let the monster escape, so he stabs his weapon into it while screaming to slow its attacks, and then Alec comes into view to help Honest fight and attack the floor boss. Alec stood before the floor boss and used a powerful vertical slash that finally cut through the monster's armor, ripping the head and a horned helmet from its massive armored body. Mabel and the wounded blonde-haired youth watched the boss battle from the side and saw Yorha, Loki, and Klasia running down the corridor to meet the team, while Honest looked closely at the result of Alex's attack on the boss. Alec is pleased with his punch, his expression focused, and says he now understands a lot about the monster that is the boss of this floor. After all, this headless knight is a massive, lifeless monster, a walking suit of armor with a huge sword and several attacks. Sirius, your Halak, tells the team she knows the headless knight is a mortal demon fused with a man and a horse, so the monster Alec and Onist are now seeing was his knight. Alec watches the monster closely and sees flashes of light escaping from its neck. Alec realizes the monster is not dead and sees it give a quick twitch, though it appears defeated. The floor boss charged Alec and swung his sword in a powerful attack, but Alec dodged with lightning speed despite the difficulty and was left very surprised. Now that Alec has two swords, he must keep fighting the floor boss even if it has no head, as monsters rain down one after another. The boss seemed weaker before, so this is quite difficult for Alec. Alec meets the monster's gaze with calm confidence, raises his weapon, and says the important thing is that the headless monster's attention is now fixed on him and the fight, and a flash appears nearby. The Ostis that appeared beside it attacks quickly, and before the monster can react, it moves toward the boss to hit him. The boss thrusts his weapon into the headless monster's armor, and it pauses for a moment. Grinning contentedly, the bully tells the floor boss he does not know whether the boss is headless in front of him, but the boss should understand that. And then Honest makes a sharp dash at the monster. The huge headless floor boss and Onist trade blows as Onist angrily warns you not to underestimate him and strikes the boss with his weapon. But the boss blocks with a huge sword, while noise and flashes of light fill the area. On Karist, in the rush of battle, he signals Alec, and Alec immediately moves to his comrade's aid, appearing directly above the headless monster and, using his magic circles that amplify blows, strikes the monster with a powerful top-to-bottom blow. Alec struggles but stays focused. Holding his sword tightly, he strikes the headless monster. The monster, brandishing a terrible weapon, strikes back at Alec. The clash of Alec's sword and the monster's blow sends gusts of wind and bursts of light in all directions. Alec hurls his sword at the monster with such force that the blade pierces its body. The monster makes a quick evasive move and bolts down the corridor away from Alec and Honest, light and dust spraying out behind it, and Alec, surprised by its speed, watches it go. Alec and Onist watch the monster and review the battle and the blows that landed. Phone Toxt assumed it was the monster's reaction to a hit, but Alec sighed and thought it was more of an evasive maneuver. Both remain alert and composed. Alec looks at Honest and says matter-of-factly that it is not so difficult because it is an ancient relic. Honest, smirking, thinks they are lucky he did not break it, because if it had been a magic sword, he would not have stood a chance. Amid the thick clouds of dust and scattered fragments, the silhouette of a headless monster still holding a sword looks motionless, until combat specialist Onist spots something in the dust and makes an interested sound while looking ahead. Oness watched the headless monster. Despite powerful attacks, it rose again from the clouds of dust, holding its head in its hand. He was not surprised by its tenacity. The fight looked set to continue. Reese and Alec smile confidently as the monster rises from the dust, and Reese says that since this boss cannot be killed with Alec's sword, he is probably immortal. Alec agrees with Honest and says there is no doubt about it, and they are ready. After the fight, the headless one stands up and puts Alex's recently severed head on his shoulders. Earlier, he had fought them without a head. Alex watches closely, surprised. The floor boss is ready to fight again. The boss, now recovered, roars so loudly that everyone in the long battle ducks and squints, and Yora and Klasia cover their ears while Alec and Honest grit their teeth. The floor boss in a horned helmet, light flashing from his eyes, keeps growling to assert his claim, and Alec can't stand it, shouting at him to shut up while holding the shorts that flew up in one hand and covering one ear with the other. Alec tensed and focused as the huge monster, its horned head looming over him again, rushed toward his team, clearly intent on attacking, clouds of dust and flashes of light surrounding them as the monster struck with a massive weapon while Alec dodged and parried the sinister sword. Stones and dust flying from each collision and blurring the battlefield, making it hard for him to withstand the monster's force. Alec cursed, struggling to keep track of the monster's attacks because it acts incredibly fast and he doesn't understand how. Alec suddenly coughs up blood, his eyes wide with surprise, and he is probably injured. The horned monster in a flowing robe keeps attacking Alec. Its already powerful blows grow stronger. Besides using its sword, it suddenly kicks Alec in the side with a huge foot. The floor boss is deadly. Watching Alec from afar during the monstrous boss fight, Yora froze in horror and fear gripped her. Alec cursed again. His face contorted in pain and blood pooled at his mouth, showing he was clearly injured by one of the terrible attacks. The boss's powerful kick sends Alec flying into the brick wall behind him, kicking up dust, small stones, and gusts of air. The monster that hit Alec jumps back to its starting position. I think he's badly injured. He hit the pavement so hard when the monster knocked him away that he coughed up blood. He is in a lot of pain and won't move, and a nearby friend shouts his name to see if he is still alive after such a terrible blow. The dust finally settles and Alec can stand, crouching by the broken side to catch his breath after the monster's blow, still holding his sword, his face scarred and thinking it was close. When the monster struck, Yorka used her staff and body magic to summon a shield that protected Alec. He didn't know she could do that and is grateful, because without it, he would have fallen and now doesn't know what to do. I take a deep breath and ask Loki how much time they have, saying there are only 3 potions left, while Loki stands behind the man who watched the battle, and a short distance away, Klasia helps the blonde-haired young man with his wounds. Loki, as always pleased with himself, looks at Alec and confidently says they have about 5 minutes left. Alec, tired, grins skeptically and says it's easy for Loki to say that, then asks if Loki watched the fight. A loud grinding of guns against each other rings out from the tip of the Onesta spear and the floor boss's sword as they converge in deadly blows near where the rest of the adventurer team sits. Honest has taken over the fight after the monster knocked Alec off the battlefield and keeps fighting the boss, but it is hard for him, so he calls Alec and urges him to hurry and help, and Alec curses softly again as he drinks the potion. Alec returns to the fight, rushing to help Onesta because they must act fast, and together they flank the monster from opposite sides for a joint attack as the clash and scrape of weapons ring across the battlefield. An enormous, monstrous boss in a horned helmet and full armor, eyes burning with rage and clutching a massive 2-handed sword. That is their opponent today, and it looks terrifying. Honest and Alec attack the terrible monster again from 2 sides. Oneness strikes with a spear while Alec supports his friend with his sword, yet the monster remains unmoved by the number of attackers. Alec smashes something with a heavy sword blow, and shiny fragments fly around as Loki watches with a smile and knows this is the moment. In the heat of fighting the boss, Alec lets out a loud, emotional cry that rallies everyone. Once again, Alec's sword and the horned monster's sword clash, facing off as each tries to gain the upper hand, and Alec stares fearlessly at the terrible monster at close range while shards and light fly around them. Alec Eglet's eyes locked with the monster that rules this floor, as blood ran down his face, even from his eyes. Yet he did not flinch and kept staring at his opponent. A blond young man, covered in blood and dirt after fighting a monster, watches Alec anxiously, while the monster indignantly shouts that Alec Iglet does not think with his head at all. The young man believes no one can fight a monster so easily without comrades and magic. If they need to buy time, they should use the same tactic they used with Mabel. Yora stands nearby, watching the battle intently. Yora looks kindly at the blonde young man Revel and says she understands his concern, but what he is offering now is simply impossible. I watch the horned floor boss continue their deadly sword dance aimed at striking the opponent. Danger is coming, and this is a fight to the death that every participant is enjoying every minute of it. They claim their own destiny, and Alec and the others take up fighting positions and hold their weapons tightly as they shout that this proves they are not just warriors, but adventurers. Their faces full of determination, though stained with dirt and blood, and their clothes torn in places. The battle continues. Alec raises his sword to block another powerful attack from the horned monster. Barry. Alec is clearly tiring from the intense fight, breathing hard, his face smeared with mud and blood. During a short break, Honest and Alec exchange a few words. Honest drinks a potion and teases Alec for being slow, reminding him he is commander of the entire squad. Alec laughs nervously and says he already drank the last potion. The falling bottle shows the fight is still on, and Anquanis tells Alec he is probably getting a taste for battle, which Alec agrees with, both ready for another round and gripping their weapons tightly. The scene shifts back in time. A view of the calm sky and lush treetops, from which petals drift slowly. Someone's voice says he wants to become a court magician. Young Classia, Yora, Honest, and Alec wear Academy of Magic student uniforms, and Alec wants to become a court magician despite his father's objections, which he tells the group with a smile while the others look at him in surprise. The men stand in a beautiful alley, each holding his Academy graduation certificate, and Clausius says if he becomes a court magician, he will not have to worry about money, while Alec wants to make life easier for his father, who raised him alone without a mother. Yora says dejectedly that they will probably all become adventurers, which is the opposite of stability. One parist gloomily adds that he is generally opposed to all this. Socrates' petals are falling from the trees behind the guys. I'm done with my studies. Orn Carouse continues to talk, gloomily believing that he and his friends are the most powerful squad of 4 geniuses in the history of the Academy of Magic, and that being together is far more fun than some useless trial, so he clearly dislikes Alec Mage leaving the team. Classia laughs at Ocaneus and his words, says who he thinks is a genius, and when he does not name himself a wine guest, bristles and defiantly claims that if it were not for this year, he would have been top of the class. But Clausia is unsure. Classia glances at Honest and keeps teasing him, calling him a genius, but on the 4th time he becomes furious at her insolence, makes a terrible face and glares at her. Alec, wearing the robes of an Academy of Magic student, watches the falling Sakura with a peaceful smile while listening from the corner of his ear as his friends joke and laugh, and he likely thinks about the future and what lies ahead for them all. Watching his friends romp, he stays where he is. Finest, after being slapped, runs away from Classia. Yora squeaks as usual, holding Classia and trying to separate them. Ella likes these 3 guys. Despite Elimita's orders, he has already made his final decision. Her sudden shout brought Alec, standing at the opening in the stone wall, back to reality, and when she waved at him, he was surprised. Back in Classia, as they carry on their playful romp, Yora smiles casually and tells Alec not to forget them, saying that even though their paths are now parting, they will meet again and be together one day, which surprises Alec. Yora cheerfully tells Alec she will come back one day to take him away from the dull life of a court magician when she and her friends become successful adventurers, and she is very sweet. Yora finishes her speech, winks cheerfully at Alec, and firmly tells him she won't accept rejection later, a parting line Alec did not expect, so he smiles shyly and agrees to her terms. Classia backs Yora, saying when they say something, they will follow through. Blind. Onseist, who apparently got punched in the nose by Classia again, says their meeting will not be the last and that Alec can count on them for help. Some light mixes with sakura petals, giving the scene a solemn, hopeful tone, and since then, Klasia and Yora stand looking at Alec and ask him to promise that one day they will become one group. Alec paused for a moment, then resolutely told his friends he did not know when, but that one day they would all become a single squad of adventurers, and his voice showed solemnity and determination. Alec sets off for this capital to become a court magician, while Honest, Klasia, and Yora head the other way toward adventures at this very moment. Their friends' life paths diverge, but Alec made a promise. A view of the city with neat buildings surrounded by mountains and trees. The capital, the court of Gardana, is the place that twice banished the greatest wizard of all time, Alec, who is resolute and believes he is ready to carry out his will for this alone. The scene returns to the present in the dungeon, where two teams are fighting a powerful floor boss. Part of one team is already injured, and the others wait for the outcome. Gist and Alec begin to get a sense of the battle and exchange opinions. At the same time, Honest and Alec raced down the brick corridor toward the monster to attack him again, but he is awake and ready for them. From outside, the fight looks endless and the man's strength seems to be running out. The massive floor boss in a horned helmet and heavy armor starts applying a protective reinforcement. Clouds of steam and raw energy suddenly wrap his body. Gripping his two-handed sword, he growls to intimidate the enemy. The boss lands a crushing blow on Honest, who dodges with a spectacular flip, and the monster's sword smashes the side brickwork, sending brick fragments and clouds of dust across the battlefield again, showing how strong the boss is. Honest and Alex attack the monster from opposite sides, forcing him to keep shifting his angle and watch their moves. They want to confuse and wear him out, and he clearly enjoys the fight, smiling fiercely as he strikes. That's how it's done. To cheer each other up, Honest and Alec kept up a running dialogue during the battle, and while still striking the monster, Honest shouted that it was Alec who first appeared 4 years later and that he alone made that face. Alec dodges the floor boss's counterattacks, and a stunned shout slips out as he narrowly avoids the horned monster's sword tip, the blade so close that his face tightens because the boss is very dangerous. Parrying another deadly kick from the floor's monstrous boss as dust flies, Alec writhes, backs away, and admits loudly that he too faced different circumstances and is struggling to cope. Alec swings his weapon and knocks the boss's sword away, then shouts loudly to show Alec he regrets it, and Alec answers with an incoherent scream Alex cannot understand while the battle does not stop. With his spear resting on the ground, he jumps up and strikes the monster while shouting to Alec that he did not understand anything. The boss, backing away after Alec's hit, is struck by Onus's powerful kick from the other side. The floor boss in the horned helmet, coated in smoke and dust, shows no sign of giving up. His eyes burn with fire and that predatory stare makes him even more eerie, and a contented laugh escapes him as he watches the monster, clearly enjoying it. The boss readies for battle again and suddenly attacks Honest, who is slightly distracted. The boss's blows come one after another. Honest quickly parries them all with his spear, though it is hard because the boss is huge. Alex calls Honest's name, worried. He always has that in his repertoire, and with a steady grin, he tells Alec that guys like him and Alec only begin to shine in places like this gloomy, dangerous dungeon, leaving Alec surprised and amazed by the strength of his spirit. Alec and Honest keep talking during the fight with the monster. Boltzmit. Honest admits it once seemed odd to him, and even after the incident with Alec's father, he still thought Alec would go with them. Alec is stunned that Onus started this conversation now in the middle of a life-or-death battle, and Onus says Alec would not have replied if the moment had not been right because Onus sees the battle as that moment. In Cranist, he urges Alec to remember his words after their first year at the Academy of Magic. It happened while he was sitting in a local tavern drinking with friends when he said something in front of the whole company, and that is exactly what Alec should remember. Convinced he should have died in battle, he felt he had come very close, and Klasia, sitting next to him, wondered why Honest would not study support magic, though he was not sure a martial genius should avoid learning it. Sitting in the tavern, your hub believed their meeting was fated. Klasia suggested they go as far as possible, and Alec sat quietly listening to his friends and fellow adventurers. Drunk, loud, overly cheerful and awestruck, he held a mug that day and laughingly told his friends they only aim to get better in life, which he found very funny and kept laughing. Back in the present, in the dungeon, Alec and Honest discuss their past while fighting the floor boss, and Ochnest angrily tells Alec he already warned him the royal court is a bad, unworthy place. Alec thought about it because giving that answer was hard. He pressed his lips and heard Honest shouting, demanding that Alec say what he himself wanted rather than what someone else wanted, while Ansky and Est urged him on and tension mounted. Alec starts to get angry, but for now he calmly asks Honest to be quiet. There is no stopping Honest, usually even-tempered, who now shouts that he will not be silent until Alex tells him what he is hiding in that chest. A new powerful attack from the boss in the horned helmet interrupted their exchange with Honest, striking Alec so hard the air seemed to explode and rain dust and stone fragments, and Alec somehow managed to fend it off. Alec grimaced, automatically thought about something completely unrelated to the fight. Feeling helpless, he did not know what they had just been talking about. Hurry. They had been friends for 6 years and ate together. He wants to help his friends solve their problems. One's face snapped Alec out of his stupor, and he realized he had almost missed a blow from the boss. But One's stepped in front of him and parried it, and the boss then asks oddly if this is a bad thing and if Alec still wants One's to shut up. Alec falls silent, feeling it is unfair as he watches Honest keep fighting the monster and finds that no words fit what he wants to say, which makes him sad and worried. Alec came to his senses, gathered his resolve, and rushed forward to help Honest, who kept fighting the monstrous floor boss. Shouting that he only wanted to help and repay him, Alec felt very excited. On squinted at Alec beside him, looking puzzled, while Alec kept repeating without stopping that he had long owed him and really wanted to repay the debt, and Alec's face showed both confidence and despair. Alec cannot stop thinking about Albacidas's sad, tear-stained, suffering face. The image is stuck in his mind and he cannot get rid of it. To Alec, that face, about to cry, does not look like Albacidas at all. Emotions got the better of Alex, and he screams that if he could change it, he could repay him. Blind to the huge monster beside him, he yells that this is why he went against everyone, and why they are all in the same boat now. Alec and Onus keep fighting the monster while arguing, and Alec tells Onus he has no right to say that, because it's their choice, and says he should be happy now as the boss keeps striking with his creepy sword. When the prince kicked him out of the squad, Alec remembers having to tell the prince everything to his face, even if it led to a fight, and to say more than usual. In his memory, the prince and his man abandoned him. Suddenly he stumbled and fell from the blow, bleeding, yet he kept beating the monster, telling Onesta or himself that all he could do was hold the position he had chosen despite the screeching. Rising awkwardly from the ground, weapon in hand and rubbing his head, he told Alec, who was amazed by the guests, that this was probably what he wanted since he would not have been at court for 4 years otherwise, and Alec stood frozen in shock. Honest, Acarist, suddenly smiles at Alec with no hint of malice, studies him closely and says Alec is not a fool, which is enough to make Alec seem decent to Honest. Strangely, Honest can be perceptive sometimes. Alec froze. Tears ran down his face as he tried to speak. The floor boss raised his huge sword again to bring it down on Alec and Honest in a deadly strike. Alec faced the possibility that his kick would miss, or that he would take the blow. A sudden bright light from a large magic circle flared above the boss, Alec, and Onesta as they fought, drawing their attention, and the boss, not realizing Alec had caused it, squinted into the glare and waited to see what would happen. Loki stands back with his arms out toward the boss, and behind him the rest of their enlarged squad, some injured and sitting on the ground, are all alive, and Alec and Onest are fighting the boss for them. Loki created the magic circle over the combatants, and just as he had intended, those 5 minutes of endless battle with the monster were needed for this, which he believed helped others think, not just himself. In the recent past, an amazed Yora tells Loki that making Alec believe he is a swordsman is a decent tactic, but that the psychological burden will probably make fighting demons harder, and Loki replies that it might help. Loki asks Yora whether the boss they are about to fight has real intelligence, which surprises her because demons usually lack it, and Loki says he didn't think it possible until he saw a smart demon himself. At this moment, a creepy floor boss and a horned helmet with glowing eye sockets and a voice appear, and Loki continues his thought and shouts that it is an intelligent demon. Loki shouts, gloating that this is an opportunity to exploit, likely referring to the boss in front of them. His clothes and hair flutter from the air currents and the spell's released power, and he speaks with clear confidence. The monster ignored Alec and Honest and rushed toward Loki and the rest of the team, who stood right behind him while he made a magic circle. Alec shouts a warning, trying to stop the monster. Loki stood with your high send standing behind him, flanked by Clasia and the wounded Revel, while Mabel grew tired of the fight, a low ledge and enclosing walls behind them leaving nowhere to run, and suddenly he froze as if he had seen something terrible or unexpected. The monster that had been fighting Alec and Onus moments earlier, which Loki was about to strike with a magic circle, struck Loki with a crushing blow from its huge sword. Loki had no time to defend himself, and it looks like the blow was fatal. The monster watches with satisfaction as the startled Loki falls, while a shocked Alec and Onest look on in horror. They had no time to stop it. It all happened in an instant. Something is off because Loki is smiling slightly. Loki let out a sudden, deafening laugh, and the monster froze in surprise. Power glowed around him as he stood before the creature that had just seemed to kill him. Everyone was stunned and confused. Loki smiles maliciously. Unharmed and clearly pleased, he watches the horned monster flee the homemade magic circle he made, but his body now seems to be melting and evaporating. At last, Loki understood why the monster feared magicians and wanted to destroy them so quickly. Suddenly, Loki's form blurred and melted into the air. Loki shouts an immobilizing spell, and a real magic circle forms under the monster's feet. Loki laughs triumphantly because the monster even passed through the circle he created. Clouds of dust swirl around. Bonesex curses. Loki, with a vicious grin, sure Loki had shown his best tricks, does not see Lorca and the others where the monster did, and says Loki lied that he lacked the mana to fool the boss. Loki says he warned Honest and the others they would fool everyone, and credits only Alec and Onest for making it possible to trick the enemy. Meanwhile, the monster struggles to break the magic circles and tries to escape. Loki orders the team to slow the monster's movement as it rushes between magic circles trying to break through, and urges Alec, Onesta, and the rest to dismantle it as soon as possible. Alec is angry, yet he wonders how Loki calculated all this so cleverly, and he is relieved Loki is alive. Von Hennis thinks he was a fool to doubt Loki and worry about what was happening. They're running toward the monster. Alec and Onest charge the floor boss with weapons in hand to finish what they had started and destroy the boss as Loki suggested. Suddenly, Onest, a little ahead, cursed loudly when he saw something he did not understand. Loki stands in the same spot watching what happens below. Grinning, he says that apparently Honest would have been angry and would have attacked him in this form. He knew it. He just knew it, and was surprised. While running, Honest steps into a magic circle that formed right under his feet. He wonders who put it there. The circle glows brighter. His clothes and hair lift as something is about to happen. Onus spotted Clasia next to Loki, and she reached toward the battle, leaving him surprised as they held each other's gaze in silence while both sensed something was about to happen. One carousel back, Loki thought he understood what was happening. It wasn't that he lacked mana at first. He had asked Classy to help carry out his plan because the real reason was that Honest disappeared from the magic circle. Cut to the past. The imposing magic academy with towers stands among high mountains and protective walls, and a voice names Alec Eglet, Jorge Isons, and Onista Lane. The teacher with glasses and a severe hairstyle calls the students by name, asks what is wrong and why the three cannot use support magic, and tells them in the middle of the empty classroom that they are not at all suited to be adventurers. Support magic is essential for dungeon cleanup, no matter how skilled the students are. If they don't learn it, they won't become good team members. Ignoring her, he insists he won't try to change people. I like to ask if they have any more potions, or the teacher shouts that she knows all about dungeons with limited items. Your Haas suffers, grabs her head, and apologizes to the guys, believing she is simply not good enough for the team. Cotton books lie nearby. A voice says it seems nothing can be done. Another team member is in the classroom after lessons, Clasia, who had been silent and was sitting and reading a book. Closing the book, she rests her chin on her hand and studies the audience. She tells everyone, including the teacher, that she will take care of everything herself if the team does not mind, and no one objects. Classia, now an adult, stands against the ruins in combat clothes and gear, and that is how she became a top expert in support magic, smart to a fault and a genuine genius. The scene returns to the present, and Loki gives Classia a quick look, surprised that she is using magic he once helped her learn so soon. The Classia looks beautiful, and smiles confidently as she prepares to attack, telling Honest she will cover him during the fight. Now Honest teleports out of the magic circle Classia created, appears above the monster and prepares to strike its horned head as the beast fights back with a huge axe while still trying to escape Loki's trap. Focused and watching the monster closely, he must calculate every move and land a decisive blow so he does not let his friends down, since the floor's monstrous boss will not yield easily. The man swings his weapon hard, knocking the monster they're fighting far back. The monster looks at the man. With a serious face, he stares ahead and calls to the monster. The man delivers a powerful kick and angrily orders the monster to be quiet, swearing at him. A happy voice calls from somewhere to announce that Mabel has returned. Mabel, a girl with short hair, jumps high with her sword behind her back. Mabel flies straight at the monster and is about to land on it. Surprised, she says that someone has arrived as promised. With all her strength, the girl strikes the monster as she hits the floor, but it dodges quickly. Held in her arms, the girl rises and says she knew everything. Mabel turns, smiles, and says this boss knows exactly how to dodge attacks. In the center of a circle, the monster looks up with a grin and a weapon in hand. Loki stands with his hand under his chin, lifting his head slightly as he sees right through this boss. Leaping high into the air, the monster spots something and fixes its gaze ahead. The monster began tearing down the wall Loki is standing on, holding a weapon he will use to fight. The man looks ahead with a slight smile, serious and ready to take a hit. At the top, the monster moves to the side. The man stretches his arms and says he will not get two chances for a successful strike. Downstairs, Mabel stands scared, facing forward with one other person beside her, and the girl shouts that Loki has completely lost his mind and the monster is already next to him. Meanwhile, the monster sprints toward the man and is about to attack him. The monster stares ahead and bares its sharp teeth in a broad smile. A sword appears in Loki's hand. A man smiles and says he has already wounded the monster by the second successful strike. Loki's blade meets the monster's, and the attacker hesitates. Loki smiles and tells the monster it must try harder. Downstairs, Mabel and a man watch the scene. The man says Loki holds a magic sword. Mabel says Loki's strength is not enough to stop the blow. Loki continues to restrain the monster's weapon. His face is focused. He clenched his teeth hard. Someone suddenly says the word charm, and the girl with the staff steps forward, raises her weapon, and calls for reinforcement. Someone stares at it, stunned. The sevenfold game is familiar to him. Whatever kind of hero Elha Izini is, she is still only a trump card. Loki's and the monster's weapons clash again with all their might. One more blow and Loki's sword will not hold. Loki stares forward and screams. Hoping he won't regret what he's about to do, he asks someone whether they will regret it. With her staff, the girl looks ahead and summons a three-point battle formation. 3 circles appear before her, linked by a triangle. A large, bright hole opens above the monster. A very strong wind rises around them, and they keep fighting. Then long chains fly forward, clanging loudly. He saw chains heading toward the monster, and they surrounded it from all sides, circling and capturing it. The man studies it and repeats the girl's words about the 3-point combat formation. This magic is powerful and binding, activated when you pass through 3 specific points within a set period. The activation rules are strict, but the effect is still incredible to me. He cannot understand why it would be used now. The drop in mobility is a mix of plausible magic. The shouting was meant to mislead the target. The sword vanishes from the men's grasp. The man does not understand why he did any of it. The chained monster still strikes the man, sending him flying backward. Mabel calls the man by name, her face showing fear, as a large explosion erupts where the monster and the man were standing. Red liquid flows from Loki's mouth as he keeps looking ahead with a small smile. A man stands at the large entrance to the arena where the fight will take place, and someone calls him Alec Exiled and says everything is ready. Loki lifts his head and laughs, and the man screams that the monster will take all their power. A gloved hand extends a test tube as the man holding it says the word Thunderbolt. A huge army of skeletal-looking monsters stands with weapons in their hands, all staring forward and preparing to attack, while a bearded man shouts acceleration and gain and strikes one of the monsters. Behind the man, a girl with a braided tail fights monsters too, and she shouts that the man's name is Leviel, but he does not turn and says the girl is Krista Wright. Which of the sailors who look like skeletons is knocked back by a man's blow? A 4-person team was surrounded by skeletal monsters. The man says they completely cut off their own chance to escape. Krista told the man they needed to find another passage. The man asked what she meant. They seemed cursed. Every path they chose became a dead end. Skeletal monsters keep attacking, while the man slaps his hands together and says they can handle her in 5 minutes. Among the many circles, a star sits at the center. Lightning began to pour down on the monster. Lightning began to pour down on the monster. Alec is using his thunderbolt. His team stands and watches it all in a daze. Monsters are wrapped in chains. Some tentacles are crawling out of his body. Tentacles kept appearing and began to lift the sword, cutting the chains. The man grits his teeth and says they can move already. The short-haired girl stares straight ahead. The short-haired girl says her magic will not last long and asks Alec for something. The girl thinks the man should act now. Meanwhile, Alec reaches for something ahead. Alec grits his teeth and closes his eyes, coughing in pain as he falls to his knees. A short-haired girl squints one eye shut and calls Alec by name. Loki stands while everyone watches it from the side twice a day, and Alec goes beyond his limits. Alec's body is already screaming from the rapid drain of mana, regardless of how brilliant he is. The man's head snaps up as he looks ahead, teeth clenched and eyes wide with anger. Alec stands up, holding the thunderbolt high above his head in one hand. Wind and rain pour from the thunderbolt. This is the final blow. Alec stares ahead with furrowed brows and a face covered in abrasions. I like that he's no longer the same person he was 4 years ago. Now he's a useless former court magician. The man remembers the short-haired girl's offer that he can join them if he needs help. And since there are only 3, they can form a new squad. The long-haired girl reaches out and tells Alec he can talk to her if he's having a hard time. She is skilled in healing magic. The man grins, showing his teeth, and says anyone but Alec can do it all. 3 people playfully surround Alec, tickling and hugging him. Alec is the one who always tries to shut you out. A bearded man with long hair smiles, glances slightly to the side, and asks to show him his magic. A few men laugh, call his full name, and say they gave him the best. Alec waves his wand. The words that accompanied him for 4 years changed him. Heavy rain pours down over the wall where Alec and the monster stand, and a black hole is tightening in the sky. Lightning shot out of the black hole. He doesn't want to let his friends down. Mabel stands stunned, looking up with his mouth wide open, his elbows pushed forward, and his face and eyes look very tired as the monster falls to the ground and tentacles continue to pour out of its body. Alex reaches out with one wand hand and summons the Thunder Beast. His face is serious and tense. A sharp-toothed magical creature appears. Alec looks away and says the single word ahead. The creature Alec summoned appears suddenly and attacks the monster everyone is fighting, and the Thunder Beast is several times larger than the boss. The boss everyone is fighting points his sword and charges forward. The monster everyone was fighting suddenly crumbles into small pieces. Alec's thunderous summoned beast slams its jaws shut and swallows the boss. Only the sword remains of the monster. His body goes limp and he falls backward, landing on the floor motionless. Alec looks up and stays lying down, knowing it is nice when people can depend on one another. The man closes his eyes. A small smile appears, and he says it's not that bad. A short-haired girl leans over a guy and asks whether he intends to become addicted, hoping he means the foolish thing the 4 of them started in the dungeon. The man sits down and looks at the girl's outstretched hand. A short-haired girl helps a man up by placing his hand on her shoulder. The man says Alec is back for good. The woman asks if that is true. She expects him to appear again. Alec smiles, his eyes closed in pleasure. Someone congratulates him on his return. Alec watches the short-haired girl smiling faintly with her eyes closed. A friend asks the man if he has a victory to give him. The man smiles. His entire body is covered in abrasions. Alec glances back at a friend as 2 girls celebrate the victory by bumping fists. Alec remembers his friend explaining the game's rules. Whoever falls first will lose and be punished. Alec screams that his friend knew and just stood there watching him fall. His friend says that Alec is not going to take their argument so lightly. This guy says he is not a demon. For some reason this time all the circumstances were against Alex, so the punishment will not be difficult. Alex closes his eyes and awkwardly says thank you. A small drop of sweat runs down the guy's cheek. Alex's friend says they will no longer keep secrets from each other. If a man has problems, he should tell others, rather than keep them to himself. Alex stands and looks at his friend in a daze. His friend says the man should not bury his head in his problems and can entrust solving them to his friends. This will be his punishment. Alex laughs softly and says his friend does not take him seriously at all. The man crosses his arms and says the punishment will be more serious in that case. It keeps laughing, saying everything is fine, as a tear of laughter drips from one eye. His friend asks if this is accurate, since Alec could thank him for such generosity. The girls stand and everyone is watching it. A short-haired girl even starts laughing. Suddenly, Loki flies up behind the girls and tells everyone they did a good job. Not suddenly, both girls knock the guy to the floor and start kicking him while Alec watches from outside. Loki says he has met many magicians. He had never seen a spell used at the same time, and first-class swordsmanship with that final strike added tremendous power. Otherwise, they would all have started round 2. Loki says he beat him with that man's help, but he does not want to fight him. Alec stands with a slight smile and holds out his hand, saying Loki's plan worked and it was fun. 2 men shake hands and pat each other on the shoulder. Alec's friend turns to the long-haired girl and says, Loki claimed he was the one who defeated the monster. The long-haired girl asks if that means they owe him. The guy and the girl turn and call their friend to ask her opinion. Loki turns and says he understood everything and will repay them. As for those 2, they are always fighting each other. Loki asks whether the team wants him to prove it to them. He offers to do it, and Alec asks what he means. The man with long hair says you must have a recommendation to be promoted to the kink rank to move from A to S, and that recommendation must come from the kink's rank and have the Guildmaster's approval. The man apologizes for the delay and introduces himself as the leader of the Scarlet Flowers Order. Alec gives an awkward wave and returns the greeting. Someone suddenly calls out to Alec. Mabel ran up to Alex and kissed him on the cheek, and the short-haired girl glared at them, her cheeks slightly flushed and her eyes wide. Mabel introduces herself, says Alec is very strong, and suggests they go to another dungeon. A short-haired girl calls Mabel's name and says Alec is their Mac. The Scarlet Flowers representative says he takes full responsibility for the recommendation. Alex's friend says he does not care if he angers everyone but agrees, and he waits patiently for the chance to work with everyone. Loki says no. The representative of the Scarlet Flowers asks which side Mabel is on. Mabel asks whether she is really that untrustworthy. A 2-person team in Mabel waves and thanks everyone for their help, saying Alec's band is great. The waving team also claims to be the legendary band of the Endless Dead. The 4 friends burst into joyful laughter with mouths wide and eyes closed. The team then begins to leave cheerfully, waiting for a western dungeon, a physicist, and an all-flower rescue operation. And it's all done. Soon everyone arrives in a small town. The girl counts the coins and says she still can't believe the team beat the level 68 boss. The whole guild talks non-stop about the team. The girl says that even with his loud speeches, the Guildmaster did not have time to say anything because it was hard work. And Alex says the underground is so huge and the terrain keeps changing and they are not happy that they could help. Alex turned and walked away from Misha. Misha asked what the guys were planning for today. Alec turns came by to say the 4 of them have a vacation together for the first time in a long time. Alec stands stunned, staring ahead, a single drop of sweat running down his cheek, as the short-haired girl says the Crassia and Ernest's stomachs are twisted. The short-haired girl thinks she will rest another day, not today. Alec says he only wanted her to show him the city and offers to go with her. Alex admits he was so busy he barely saw anything outside the guild. The short-haired girl agrees, and as the senior witness will take care of it without problems. The girl smooths her hair as she remembers Ernest saying he had a stomach ache and could not go to the race. She says she has urgent business. A short-haired girl follows Alec, her cheeks flushed and clearly nervous. Alec looks at the girl and says it's time to hit the road, and she agrees. The short-haired girl says Fizzle is a city of adventurers and wears a big smile. The girl says the market is the best place to find bargains on weapons, armor, and other items rather than specialty stores. The girl warns Alec to watch out for many dishonest merchants selling low-quality goods to newcomers, and the man says he has already noticed everything. A man offers a girl a special pill that will give her 10 days of vigor for just 100 gold. The girl screams with joy, and bystanders say she has never heard of such a pill. A guy grabs the girl's hand and pulls her along. She can only run after him. Alec says he already went to the markets, so he suggests going shopping for groceries and then walking here with everyone else. Elha looks up, a bit embarrassed, and agrees with the guy. Elha says she begged Ernest and Russia yesterday to buy everything they needed. Only Ernest was busy with his swords while Gracia played with a toy bear. EHLH shouted at them for buying useless junk again and told them to give it back. Ernest said it would come in handy later. Gracia said she did not buy it, but only picked it up. Elha says she's ashamed they don't even know how to manage money properly. Alec says that means she's decided to take responsibility for it now. Elha says happily that it is good they have a friend like Alex. A girl spots an elven ribbon on a counter and asks us what to do here with such a rare item. Alec asks if it is some kind of accessory, and Elha says they boost magic, and that she has been looking for them for a long time. The girl reads a small sign showing the price of 50,000 gold. Elha hesitates because it's a little over her budget, but if she doesn't buy these tapes now, there may not be another chance. While Elha hesitates, the man's hand reaches out and puts several gold coins into the seller's palm. The girl looks up in embarrassment and asks Alec if he is sure about this. Alex is sure because a girl's belief in magic accounts for half his team's success. LHA thanks the man and promises to use these elf ribbons carefully. A man and a woman walk down the street. Alpha says they did this during a fortune-telling. They pooled their money and bought a potion. The beautiful one tried to make her own, but it failed. After Elha and Alec took a snack break, we went to the large library to study books. A cat and a man stand on a tall tower, shining a light ahead. Alec says he can see the whole path to the dungeon and asks whether Fizzle likes it. Alec says it's fun here. The city is lively and different from Garden. He feels like an on-tourist. Someone is knocking. I'm going to knock him on the head. Elha stares at the guy. She says she wants to hear his answer again and hopes asking for it is not selfish. When they met again in Cardun, she says she asked him to join the group, and he left his job as a court magician to go with them. That's why she sometimes worries that I might be overexerting myself. Alec says he is sure there are no completed cases left among the townspeople, and that he feels pathetic and is still upset about it. Alec looks away and says he really thinks striving to become the strongest is a good idea right now, and as Ernest would say, it makes sense now that Elheha and Gracia are back together. Wiping her face, the girl says they kept each other from falling apart. Alec laughs and says he's never heard that before. Insisting it's her doing, the girl says she just said so. After all, she's the leader now, and endless days cannot exist without the four of them. Elha says she is very glad Alec is the kind of person who can keep everyone together. Alex Pisces smiles at the girl and says he just wanted her to know how he truly feels. The girl faces the light. Her cheeks are even more flushed. Alex starts to speak, and the girl asks what he wants to say while a faint blush still colors her cheeks. Alex says he lost the argument with Ernest, and at the end he promised Ernest he would talk to him about his problems. The girl smiles broadly and blushes even more. Alec awkwardly says this is a promise between two men and apologizes for dragging the girl into it. Elle turns away and the man asks if she has a stomachache. She says everything is fine. The team returned and saw the stab wound, and they were shocked and stared at the man. The team moved toward the long-haired, bearded man. The man, seeing the girl and the young man, says they're finally back. Alec asks if the man wanted to see them. The man says it's only about the men. The man glances at Alec and says a visitor is waiting for him in the old house. The man says that while this man is inside, he will say something. This person may not be very pleasant for Alex. Alder steps forward and asks if someone is waiting for Alec. The two cow teammates look tense. El Kahia keeps asking whether this man is an old friend, and whether he is from Garden or from him. The man tells Alex to go to that person now, otherwise it is getting on his nerves. Alec grabs the door handle, slowly pulls it away from him and steps into a bright room. A tall man with long black hair stands in front of the door, staring ahead. Alec recognizes the man as Ciro Bogdan. The man has no idea why a noble from Gordon is here. Alec bows and says he is glad to meet you because they have not seen each other for a long time. Sir Vaughn asks whether Alec is the messenger. The man's eyes widen as he accuses Alec of long planning to kill someone and asks why Alec never told him, while Alec closes his eyes slightly, thinking this man already knows everything. With all due respect, Alec straightens up and says he cannot believe this man thinks Alec would do such a thing. The man lowers his head, exhales, and agrees with the other man's words, saying he seems very unlucky. Alex admitted he had doubts too, but they accepted him into the group as a magician. The man turns his head sharply, stares ahead, then asks again about the magician and says Alec is wrong about this. The man says this man's wounds are already fully healed, and he was about to teach him reason, but he cannot even handle Alex. The man says he also performs the export function on the same day. Alex looks surprised again and asks whether His Highness is here now as the man grins. He says this man wants to finish one thing. The man reaches into his secret pocket and pulls out a letter. He claims the king gave it to him. Alec seems to have taken a liking to the royal family. Alec stares at the letter and stays silent. A man calmly asks if it is a royal decree. Another man says he was told it was a petition. He sought forgiveness for his son. If the man is not mistaken, it was an apology. Alec asks you to tell his lordship that 4 years is a long time, but his lordship did him a great favor. I like asking where His Highness is now. The man speaks in the underground arena as a bearded man called her. The man calls it very stupid, complete nonsense, and a waste of time. Alec asks if the man is being serious right now. The classroom is downstairs. Alex turns and heads for the exit as Elha calls him. Elha asks if the man is okay, and the girl looks very worried. Alex turns around, smiles, and says he will only settle the score. The man goes upstairs and tells Elhada to wait and not go anywhere. In a large underground arena filled with dust, a man stands in the center. Alex stares ahead, as Sir Vogue Young stands behind him. Sir Vogue Young says his father wanted the kingdom to change the status quo. Since His Majesty the King thinks so, this man says it is the right thing to do. At that moment the man turns, grits his teeth and says this is his only option. This man points his finger and says they were chosen at birth and will not listen to someone else's nonsense. The man cannot understand why his father rejected him and is exposing him now, and he refuses to accept that his father thinks the 15 years he lived were a lie and asks him not to pretend to be a fool. A man is shouting that no one should play with him and that others can play with anyone else but not with him. The man suddenly became exhausted and began breathing quickly. Sweat ran down his face, and a tear fell from one eye as Alex stands straight and watches from the side. The man starts screaming again. He says he can't understand why everyone has to die. Turning to his father, he says, "No one will ever understand how he feels." Alex says he doesn't know anything. He can't tell how this guy feels and has no idea why he can't accept it. Alex says that's all he can say. He's wrong about everything. He says Alec ignored everything he just said, so he stopped trying to explain anything to Alec and they will finally talk here. The man starts screaming and asks whether Alec wants him to listen to his nonsense. Then says Alec needs to stop playing with him and calls him a commoner. Alec looks ahead calmly and says they are not so different. The man waves his hand, says he won't change his mind or accept it, and sees no reason for this replacement. The man turns to Pierre Wagonand and asks him to keep his promise to himself. He flatly refuses these immediate changes and will prove it with his own hands, insisting he is not wrong. "Why are you standing with your swords out and telling Alec he has to accept the duel?" Alec remains motionless as an unknown man rushes toward the other man at breakneck speed. This man stares straight ahead. Servan remains against the wall with his arms crossed. Alec turns around and frowns, then looks slightly to the side. The attacker strikes with both swords and Alec manages to block the blow. The attacker raises his swords again to strike, and Alec sees something that surprises him. The man asks while striking blow after blow, leaving Alec stunned as if seeing an ancient relic for the first time. Alec stared ahead and began to recall the events with this guy. A stranger grips a long sword, looks ahead, and asks if anyone wants him to use a different weapon. Alec stands nearby and says this sword is too heavy for the man, and a pair of small swords would be easier to handle. A man asks to see his sword. The finest craftsman in King's Landing forged it. It is no longer just a weapon, but a work of art. Alec remembers the Dauphin, who treated his old weapons with such reverence that he would not let him suggest anything different. Alec laughs softly and keeps staring ahead, his lips slightly parted. Dauphin keeps attacking Alec, but Alec dodges every attack. Finally, the Dauphin flew to the side and fell over by itself. Alec continues to stand on two legs and only watches the Dauphin. Alec turns to Sir Vaughn and asks whether he caused this. The man asks the sire what he did to his highness. Sir Vaughn says Alec does not need to deny the defense's successes, only to confirm them. That is all a man can say. Looking ahead with his head slightly lowered and his arms crossed over his chest, the man says he does not understand the Dauphin because he is so stubborn and then feels he must justify it. The Dauphin stands, holding his small swords in both hands. The man says the Dauphin is the only one of his kind who tries to do everything himself. The man stares ahead and exhales. Alec says everyone could envy the Dauphin's stubbornness. Then the Dauphin sends Alec away and takes off. The Dauphin strikes again while Alec blocks the blows with a single thin wand in his hand. The Dauphin looks up and down with a furrowed brow and lips pressed tight, and Alec notices something again as his eyes widen. The Dauphin strikes from below because of the height difference, so he can cut anyone. The Dauphin attacks Alec again, but Alec steps back and defends himself with his wand. Sir Vaughn asks whether anyone thinks any of the men would be that stupid. Vaughn dislikes idiots who sit at the top and fools who only talk. Saravan claims he taught the Dauphin to use a sword so it could fight Alec. Dauphin rushes forward and thrusts his swords, striking Gladion. Something shattered and stones flew from Alec. Alec stays calm, a faint smile forming as one sword strikes and a crack spreads from the impact. A glowing circle with a star formed around Alec, who holds a wand as debris flies on both sides. Delphus stands, breathes heavily, and looks ahead as he learns the magic of support. The Dauphin knows why all this happened and why he survived. He begins to explain, but stops before finishing. Alec says Emperor Myron ordered him to protect the Dauphin. After the man chased Alec away, he kept heading to the dungeon's 30th level, able only to run because he was wounded and defeated. The Dauphin says one day he found and read a memo Alec had left. Alec thought it over and asked about the memorandum again. The Dauphin says the corrosive but perfect memorandum was right. It was right not only about the dungeon, but also about the Dauphin's completely calculated behavior. Dauphin considered himself a genius. A man asks if Vaughn told Alec everything. He rejects Alec and wants to end it all. The Dauphin points at Alec, asks what Alec did to him, insists it was Alec not Vaughn because Alec is a genius, and repeats that he rejects Alec. The Dauphin orders Alec to bring out his ancient relics. Alec closed his eyes while the Dauphin continued to tell him about them. Alec declares the destruction of heaven and earth, and a huge sword suddenly appears in his hands, which he grips tightly. Alec says the Dauphin already knows he is not as good as he says he is, but he keeps doing it anyway. Alec asks permission to ask one question. Does His Majesty truly believe the kingdom should change the status quo? The Dauphin explains his father wanted to test what commoners could do, so he sent him to this dungeon with Alec. The Dauphin says Alec was used as a stumbling block to force the Dauphin's father to decide. Alec says it makes perfect sense because the king treated him like his own son. The Dauphin says Laquette is deeply offended, but now Laquette knows why. Alec says it's the other way around. All 4 years he thought were useless were actually worth much more. This was the best reward Alex could have imagined. A Dauphin looks ahead, surprised. Servant looked up, puzzled, and then looked ahead. Alec takes a more comfortable grip on the hilt of the sword and says everything is fine. Alec stands, legs wide and sword arms lowered. The Dauphin and Sir Vaughn look ahead in surprise. Their eyes are wide and their eyebrows are raised. Alex looks ahead and says he's about to attack, speaks the word Regulus as his anger grows more like a dolphin, and a bead of sweat rolls down his cheek while a tear slips from his eye. Sir Vaughn stands against the wall with his arms crossed, staring ahead while one of the men keeps shouting denials or saying he doesn't understand, but he still can't do anything. The Dauphin's upbringing and values are his punishment. Lying on the ground with his lips pressed tight, he crawls forward. The Dauphin still sits on the floor, looking up in fear. Alec stands beside him with his sword raised behind his back, ready to strike. The Dauphin came here to be beaten. Alec suddenly lowers his sword. A large explosion has just gone off where the Dauphin stood. Sir Vaughn's eyes widen as it happens. Alec stands with his sword lowered, dust hanging in the air on both sides of him. The sword's sharp tip rests beside the Dauphet. The man is unharmed. The Dauphin asks why Alec did it. The Dauphet suddenly screams and demands to know why Alec Eglet left him alive, assuming Alec felt sorry for him. The Dauphin stands, asks what he did to Alec, and says Lafayette does not and never has respected him. Again, the Dauphin falls to the ground and says he does not know what to do. Alec stands nearby and watches him. Lowering his head, the Dauphin says he does not know who he is. The Dauphin grits his teeth and tears run down his face, while a man asks what he should do next and what is good and what is evil. And the Dauphin says he understands nothing, knows nothing, and does not know how to do anything. The Dauphin began to cry harder while still believing in himself. In the end, he wound up here, and Alec, as always, was right, standing over him with sympathy in his eyes. The Dauphin says he thought that if Alec had heard him, or if something had happened to him, his father would have changed his mind. The Dauphin continues to lie on the ground, unlocking himself by hand. It was the only way he could be himself. The Dauphin lifts his head, looks up with tears in his eyes, and asks why Alec is looking at him like that. The Dauphin suddenly began screaming again. He orders Alec to tell him who he is and what to do. Alec stands calmly and asks why the Dauphin is asking him that, and the Dauphin's eyes widen as he looks at Alex. I look and let out a short laugh. He says he doesn't want to laugh at other people's misfortune. This life is just the Dauphin. Alex said he only came to mock the Dauphin. Expecting only obscene insults from them, he became very angry. Alec gets life advice from the Delphin, who remains seated on the floor and looks up. Alec keeps talking, but everything feels strange to him and he feels odd. The Dauphin looks up curiously, then suddenly lowers his head and closes his eyes tightly. Clenching his teeth tightly, the Dauphin apologizes. Alex's eyes widen when he hears it. The man asks again. The defense starts shouting that it was bad, then asks if Alec is happy now. Alex scratches his cheek and says he's not being sarcastic. There's no point asking him what to do next because he doesn't know. Alex says that all his life people have been saving him. He doesn't know who he is, or what choice he made. Alex says these are not the kind of things you need to trust others to solve. Alec looks ahead and, smiling slightly, tells the Dolphin to decide for himself. The Dauphin sits on the floor, says he's fine, and doesn't know why he's talking to Alex. Turning to Servan, who stands to one side, the Dolphin asks him to give it something. Next moment, the Dauphin clutches a mantle in his hands and says he is returning something he has had all along. The Dauphin holds out a letter and asks Alec to read what his father wrote, saying the post of court magician is always open to Alec. The Dauphin says the king also wants to apologize in person, and then asks to take the mantle still in his hands. Alec says he no longer needs the robe and hands the letter back to the man. Alec says the group he joined won't let him leave because he can't go back no matter how much he wants to. The Dauphin turns away abruptly and makes an incomprehensible sound. The man moves to the exit and tells him they are returning to King's Landing, and he has no reason to stay. A man asks how Alec could show such disrespect for hospitality to His Majesty. Alec smiles as he looks ahead and asks whether it is too late for the Dauphin to talk about it because he is a simple commoner. The Dauphin grits his teeth, turns around, and says he does not like Alec. Alex's face lights up with a smile as the two men split up. He says he doesn't like the Dauphin either, and he's glad they're on the same wavelength. The scene opens in a small house. Suddenly a loud voice calls Alec from inside. Alec Eglet keeps sleeping, covering his eyes with a book. Ernest glares at his friend with a toothbrush in his mouth. Ernest yanks the blanket out from under Alec, so Alec jumps up, sending his books to the floor, and Ernest says if Alec doesn't get up now, he'll hit it. Alec glances at his book on the floor. Ernest says he needs to change his reading habits before morning, and Alec tilts his head back, scratches the back of his neck, and apologizes to his friend. Ernest urges Alec to get up, wash, and eat, saying adventurers always rise early in the morning. Alec eats his breakfast and says his friend is very strange. Alec hands over his breakfast and says it's part of the daily routine, suggesting they do it after breakfast. And Ernest turns to his friend and, smiling, repeats that. The whole team met on the small field for their training session, and Alec fights Ernest with swords. Elhat turns and looks ahead, and behind her a long-haired girl practices with a bow and asks if the guys think fighting in the morning is not a bad idea. Erna says it is a melee weapon. a real combat weapon. Alex says a 4-year difference in combat experience separates him from his friend, creating a big gap. Ernest dodges Alex's attack, and Alex says that gap needs to be reduced. Alec holds his sword overhead to block his friend's attack while Ernest shouts, "Let's go!" Two friends start fighting. Alex tries to block every attack while Ernest attacks each time. Two friends lock eyes, both dead serious and neither willing to back down. Suddenly, Alec attacks a friend, hits the friend's sword, and breaks into 2 parts. 2 girls watch in surprise as a piece of the broken ball falls beside the grandfather. Ernest asks how their experiences differ because Alec is a real monster. Alec says he can't understand how his friend can drift so far away all the time, so he thought that at least today he could beat him. Ernest tells Alec he needs another 100 years of study to beat someone like him in a duel if he offers to fight with ancient relics again. And Elhag gets between the friends and stops them, saying getting seriously injured and training is bad. Loki appears, says he's impressed they work out in the morning, and offers, as an S-rank holder, to train them personally if they don't mind. Everyone on the team turned to Loki and stared at him. The whole team turned and walked away from Loki. The long-haired girl asked if they practiced team fights on the lower floors. Ernest said he wanted to reach level 66 as soon as possible. A small card appears in Loki's hands. Loki says he is the one who formed the low-ranked team. Ernest and Elsa turn around sharply and stare ahead, dumbfounded with their mouths wide open. Elha begins climbing toward Loki to grab the card. Loki asks whether she really needs it and says he is not sure it is worth giving away. A hand suddenly hits Loki on the head. Krista stands behind the man and asks if Loki is a child. Surprised, Alec and Elsa stare at the girl. They recognize her as the group's leader. Krista apologizes for Loki, says they are here to deliver it for the Guildmaster, and holds out the card. The team began reading the card in Ely's hand, which says the Little Rose recommends the Endless Days group for promotion, and that the Guildmaster of Fizzle approved it. Elsa suddenly shouts joyfully, her eyes squeezed shut. Ernest approaches Elhan and asks her to let him look. El steps to the side and watches the two with a smile. Krista tells Alec that only S-rank parties may enter the Architect dungeon, which is far more dangerous and difficult than any dungeon Alec had seen before. Krista contacts Alec and says if they get into trouble they should contact them and they will come to their aid. Alex gives a weak smile and looks ahead, then the man reaches out and they shake hands, and he says he'll keep that in mind. Loki turns to Elha and says that since they are all S-rank, they should celebrate with dinner, and Elha agrees with him. Alec and Ernest said they did not mind and were quite hungry, and Loki says there is no problem, but he will leave them because he has a couple of unfinished matters. Crystal looks ahead and says, Loki has no plans or business. 2 men took Loki under their arms and pulled him the other way. One man says Krista is very funny. Later, Alec, Ernest, and Elha walk down an empty street. Ernest says he ate too much and that Pecos has the best rank. Alec, carrying Elha on his back, says Loki cried at the end. Ernest says Krasya ate many times more than the other guys and then left. Alec says the long-haired girl is a real demon. Ike turns back and looks at the woman sleeping on his back and says the girl has drunk a lot. Ernest says it's fun. With a toothpick in his mouth, Ernest says Elha was glad they got the Albalist rank and that it was good Alex stayed with them instead of going to the king. Alec watches his friend as a small tear rolls down his cheek. The man awkwardly asks Ernest not to talk about it. Ernest says only Alec and Elhack can do it, and if Ernest were here alone, he would beat Alec. Alec suggests going with him next time, somewhere else. Cressia stands with her arm outstretched, wrapped in a band with a circle and a star at the center, and calls for healing magic. The man's body is covered in cuts and scrapes. Suddenly every wound disappears and he exhales. A girl approaches Krasya and thanks her. The hospital is full of wounded people and lacks enough healers. Krasya says everything is fine and she was happy to help. Cressia looks away and says there are many wounded here, and the girl asks if these people were acting together in a rage. The man Krassia healed calls her by name and asks if the girl really heard nothing. The man says they were attacked not by demons, but by members of a criminal group that targets adventurers called the Dark Guild. Alec stands in a large, busy library holding a book and studying it carefully, and it contains notes on the Arcadia dungeon that are exactly what he was looking for. Alec sits at the table and realizes he has 4 years without experience. To catch up with the team, he must solidify his knowledge. A young man rests his head on the table and looks ahead, then calls Alec a buccan and says he is a hard worker. Alec looks up and focuses ahead with interest. Alec asks if the man is addressing him. The man calls Alec by his full name and says he's been waiting for him all day. Alec apologizes to the guy, explains he was too focused on books, and says he doesn't know the guy's name. A man did not introduce himself, but says there is a cafe with a terrace next to the library. He thoughtfully says the cafe has a wonderful parfait and that he likes sweets. After a while, Alec and the other man sit in a cafe. Alec holds a cup while the other man is already on his fourth. The man asks the waitress to bring 5 more special Kotsushika parfaits, and Alec looks surprised and asks why the man hasn't eaten yet. Alec sips his drink and says he's not sure if the guy is trying to mock him, but asks to get down to business. The waiter brings 5 servings of the special parfait the man just ordered, and he thanks the woman warmly. A man puts a large piece of parfait in his mouth, chews quickly and swallows, then offers his hand and introduces himself as Luolk, a member of the S-rank Nameless Squad. Alec suddenly chokes on his drink, and Luke Golg says he reacts well and turns out to be a good guy. Lulog says he heard Alec's squad recently returned from a raid and earned an S-rank, and he just wanted to know who Alec is. Alex sits, staring ahead with no smile. He asks what will happen now. This is what Lufold understood in just one meeting. Luprog says Alec is wonderful and perfect for fixing all the flaws, notes they are now in the center of the maze, and offers to join them to help clean it up. In another part of the hospital, the long-haired girl turns sharply and asks about another victim. The copy goes after Liviel. A man says the wounded woman is Olivia of the Nameless Squad, who was attacked by the Dark Guild while alone. Krasia asks whether the girl is badly injured. Livy tilts his head back slightly and says the girl is seriously injured and will be unable to return to her squad for a while. A man and a long-haired girl enter a small room where a girl lies on the bed, completely bandaged. The girl remains lying with her eyes closed. Gracia leans toward her. Laville apologizes for asking this of Gracia. Gracia says everything is fine. Gracia pushes aside the bandages and inspects the sword wounds across her body, concluding she is facing a swordsman. Gracia puts a hand to Olivia's face to check her breathing. First, she wants to treat the wounds so Olivia can withstand a large amount of magical power. Gracia realizes she must stay the night and tries to contact El Tsaha when someone suddenly grabs her hand. Olivia opened her eyes, still holding Crazy's hand, and asked where they were. Crazio looks at the girl in surprise and says they are in the guild, and the Guildmaster asked Crazio to heal Olivia. Crazia asks if Olivia remembers what happened, since she heard Olivia was attacked by the Dark Guild in the dungeon. Her bandaged hand suddenly clutches the sheets beneath her as she sits up and talks about the traitor, hunched over in pain. Crazia says a girl must stay here to survive. Olivia orders her wounds to be healed. Olivia looks to the side and asks whether Crazia is here to help, then says she needs to help her team. Olivia's crazy aunt shakes her head in denial as Olivia, standing in front of Crazia, looks at her in surprise. Crazia warns that if Olivia strains herself in this state, she will get worse. She notes Olivia seems to have an S rank but lacks basic magic knowledge. Olivia rushes up to Crazia, says she is a support magician, and asks what Crazia knows about swordsmen. Olivia's arms go limp and she drops the crazier clothes, collapsing unconscious onto the bed. Crazy A stares at Olivia and exhales. Crazy A takes off his gloves to help with her teeth. Crazia squeezes the water from the cloth, places Olivia in a normal position, and begins to wash her. Crazia sees that Olivia bears both fresh and old wounds and assumes she has been through a lot. Bolivia Nameless must have been one of Fizzle's best swordsmen. Crazia now wonders how strong the enemy must be after he defeated Bolivia. Crazia holds out her hand, remembering Olivia's words about the traitor, standing over Olivia under a bright light as she rewinds Olivia's leg here, with dishes next to the items she uses to treat wounds. Crazia directs her magic at Olivia again, bright light streaming from her hands and sweat dripping from her tense face. Crazia enters the room carrying a small suitcase. Everyone vaccinates the girl. Crazia greets everyone. A man thanks Crazia for the treatment she gave yesterday. Crazia grabs the door handle and pulls it toward her, then calls Olivia and says she is entering the room. Olivia sits on the bed counting something and waving her sword with Laville beside her. Crazy turns to Leviel and says that as Guildmaster, he has to tell Olivia to stop. Pointing at Olivia, Leviel says she is not listening to him. Leviel insists he's only here to talk, but Olivia has not mentioned her dark guilt. Gracia turns to Olivia and asks her to say who attacked the girl, while Olivia remains on the bed, silent. Olivia closes her eyes and refuses to say anything, blaming herself entirely. Olivia says it doesn't matter because her legs still don't work properly. Leviel says being seen as crazy can help others. Gracia turns to the Guildmaster and says she's here to treat Olivia, then tells him to leave, and he stands and exits the room. A circle with a star in the center surrounds Olivia's leg. Gracia helps Olivia lie down on the bed and says that after resting, Olivia will be able to walk as before if she avoids rash actions. Olivia looks ahead sadly and says Gracia is not listening to her about the case. Gracia says she is doing everything she can, that if asked, she will do it, and if she fails, she will ask someone else. Gracia says people think she is good at this business, but she is just living her life, and then Olivia bows to her without getting out of bed and apologizes. Olivia admits she said many terrible things, but she was helpless then, and now she is saved. Krista stares ahead. Olivia vows she will repay Krista's debt someday. Krisha suddenly pulls Olivia's head close and gently kisses the top of her surprised head. Olivia steps away from Gracia and asks why she did it, her face showing both outrage and fear. The crazy person, with a slight smile, says, "This is the magic of relaxation, and it acts like the magic of healing." Olivia's mother was really good at the spell that stops tears. Gracia holds out a small bowl of liquid and tells Olivia to drink it, saying it came from the pain here and wishing Olivia a restful sleep because it will help her wounds heal faster. Olivia holds a bowl of liquid Gracia gave her and says Gracia's first and last name. Something breaks and small pieces fly everywhere. Olivia apologizes. In the same house where the team lives, Elha and Ernest exchange surprised looks and ask about the raid. Alec stands in front of his friends and says the man's name is Luolgue, that he is from Nameless, and that he would think about the man's proposal. Ernest's comment that the man looked old caught Alec off guard, but they could not discuss the man's real age. Elha says Luol is from an elf family and is a rare person who can wield a sword skillfully. Alec thinks and says, since Luol is an elf, nothing is surprising, Ernest wants to know whether Luolg has shared details about the dungeon called the Labyrinth. Alec remembers Lu Olgen from the cafe and says they go to level 72 just above the bottom. Their plan is to defeat the floor monster, reach the bottom of the dungeon core, and get the lowest level core. Alex's eyes widen when he hears about the low level. Luke Holt asks whether that is bad. A man says he can give them the dungeon core. Lulug says he actually has someone to deal with and is already handling it. Hopes Alex's team agrees, then puts a small ball on the table and asks me to say hello to everyone. Alec holds the ball that is the dungeon's core. Ernest is surprised Luog went to the bottom and just handed the core to Alec. Ernest steps back and says Alec is very good. Alec agrees. Elha asks if Ernest means that I can set them up. Elha says Luol has gathered all the nameless ones together, and she does not think he could lie. The girl's face is calm as she looks up slightly. Ernest, keeping a straight face, offers to go ask the unnamed participant in the hospital about everything. Hay asks if Ernest means Olivia, and if the girl is hurt. Alex says the girl should already be patched up. Hay goes, outraged that the ass rank is lagging behind the Dark Guild, says so while the girl assumes they are being used to the Dark Guild's advantage. Seeing the team, Misha began calling Elha and said she only wanted to talk to her, and her face looked scared and worried. Elha rushes to Misha and asks what happened. Misha says it's about Mrs. Kratia. Alec notices something and stares at it intently. Off to the side, Ernest approaches Krasia, who is walking quickly and tells the man to move because she needs to hurry, and then she suddenly falls. Alec catches her, calls her by name, and asks if she is okay. Her face looks exhausted, and her cheeks are flushed. Elha rushes to Krasia and asks what happened to the girl. Krasia says the girl is fine and only slightly hurt by the potion. She lowers her head and says Olivia has left, and the girl thinks Olivia went to the dungeon. Ernest asks what the big deal is. Krasia gets angry and says Olivia is still injured and cannot fight. Ernest asks again what the big deal is. Krasia says the dungeons have become more dangerous because of the Dark Guild, and Olivia is an S-rank swordsman, so they may meet face-to-face many times. Ernest says that even if it happens, it's none of their business. The man says it does not look like Krasia. Krasia turns away. Her face is sweaty and flushed. Crazy. It turns her head to look straight ahead and says the word traitor. Krasia says Olivia told her that the people in the dungeon were not only from the Dark Guild. They listened to Olivia as if she were a beginner. Krasia says she expected this and that Olivia survived only because she was rescued. So she walks confidently to the exit and says she will no longer take part and will act alone. Krasia, Elha, and Alec step out the door and walk beside the girl. Alec says if this is about Christia, it's about him. Elha smiles and says everyone is smart, and it's time for them to take the lead. Ernest looks straight ahead and says he was just heading to the dungeon so they can drop into the maze. Gracia pretends she did not hear the man, which angers him more, and he tells the girl not to gloat. Gracia breaks into a happy laugh. Ernest points forward and says they are going into the dungeon maze to look for the missing paints. The team is gathering in their house. Alex quietly puts his jacket on over his clothes. I like to list everything he took, including a notebook, potions, and food. Ernest shouts that it's all wrong and that he has already found what he needs. Ernest throws something and calls Alec. Alec catches it and looks at his friend in surprise. Ernest says it is a secret weapon and must be protected. The team stands at the entrance to the southwest dungeon, known as the Labyrinth. Ernest says it's another dirty place, with Alec, Elha, and Krasia behind him. Elha warns the dungeon is filled with many spatial magic traps and is a real maze. Mabel says the teleports inside can cause people to get lost, so they need a balanced team like theirs. Mabel suddenly moves in close to Alec, takes his hand and asks whether she is right or wrong. Elha asks in surprise why Mabel is here. Mabel, as if nothing had happened, says she is here to see Alec. Mabel says she was only joking and that Lul asked her to join a raid during nameless, endless days. Olivia says Mabel is replacing her. Mabel smiles and says they are both S-rank swordsmen. Mabel steps toward Alec's face. She says she wants to see Alex's magic again because it is very bright. LH steps between the man and the woman and pushes them apart, grows angry, says Olivia has left and demands to know what Lupal is doing, while Naples says there are no footprints and that they are nameless. I look ahead, unsure. Ernest says it's just a group where everyone is self-sufficient in both class and character. The nameless ones have a leader, but most participants act alone and don't care where others are except when clearing dungeons. Mabel says Olivia is just as quiet and calm. Ernest says Mabel is the loudest. Mabel lowers her head and says Olivia is often misunderstood and is actually a very nice girl. Mabel remembers sitting on the ground. Olivia stood by the sword and said it was not funny that Mabel was following her around. Mabel calls Olivia an excellent swordsman and asks Olivia to teach her interesting things. Olivia apologizes and says she usually works alone, and in Nameless, she only wants to enter the dungeon. Mabel moves closer to Olivia, suggests they go together next time, and asks whether she is right that this is a great idea. Olivia thinks it over and says that if it's about working moments, it sounds good. Jumping back, Mabel joyfully repeats Olivia's promise and says they will meet tomorrow in the central dungeon. Mabel says that the next morning Olivia was standing like a bayonet near the dungeon. Elhan Alexi finds it very cute. Mabel knows Olivia is in a lot of pain right now. As Olivia's best friend, she knows what she's talking about. Mabel scans ahead and asks Alec to help find her friend Olivia. Alec smiles and tells Mabel she can rely on him. Ernest says it's time to move ahead. The man points at Elha and tells her it's time to take on all the responsibilities. Alec agrees with his friend. Elha asks Alec to wait. Krasia turns away when Elha speaks to her. Elha asks Krasia to stop pretending she doesn't know what's going on. Ernest says Elhe, as the group leader, should cheer up the team. Alec says it feels like a ritual. Looking away, Elha says this is the first and last time because it confuses her a little. Then she turns and clears her throat. Elha suddenly screamed that they would break every heart and that endless days lay ahead, and behind her the whole team smiled and raised their hands. The team has entered the Fizzle Labyrinth dungeon and is now on the 72nd floor in the Temple of Tauros. Ernest turns to Krasia, asks what she is doing, and tells everyone to move on. Krasia says she is concentrating. Elsa says Loki taught her teleportation magic, and she plans to build a teleporter for everyone. Even if they split up because of the traps, they can always return. Krasia sits on a circle with a star at its center. Ernest lets out a short laugh and says Krasia needs to calm down, otherwise she'll start crying like a little child. Krasia suddenly attacks Ernest from the foot, leaving him no time to dodge and hitting him right in the face. Elahai and Alex stare at it all in a daze, their mouths and eyes wide with surprise. Ernest falls to the floor and slides as far away from Krupizia as he can, then steps onto a circle with a star in the center. Alex suddenly screams that this is a spatial trap and calls out his friend's name. Ernest remains on the floor with his eyes closed. He runs to his friend and reaches out his hand, but he alone steps into the magic circle and one of his legs begins to glow. Two girls look at the center where Alec and Ernest stood, but an outbreak has started and no one is there. Alec looks ahead and sees the monsters turn toward the man who just appeared. Alex covers his face with his hand and stands frozen in the middle of the monsters, saying he ruined everything. Suddenly, all the monsters let out a loud roar and attacked Alec, who raised his wand and summoned a lightning bolt. He defends himself again with lightning discharge magic against a horde of monsters. Lightning strikes one of them. A monster sneaks up and attacks him from behind, and he does not see it. Something suddenly pierces the monster's head. Alec turns around and sees Krasia beside him shooting monsters with her bow. A long-haired girl approaches a man and says his secret weapon proved useful sooner than she expected, and Alec knows it. Mobius rings are magical devices that keep two wearers from separating. No matter how far Alec goes, he cannot be separated from Krasia. Alec says he did not expect to be separated from the girl and the others so soon, and the girl with long hair laughs briefly, saying the guy must really be worried about Elhoth. A long-haired girl leans forward, looks askance at the man and asks if he is unhappy that he stayed with her. Alec hesitated and tried to say there was more, and the girl understood. The long-haired girl laughed and said she was just joking. Krasia says Elheha will be fine. An earnest person is only good at fighting. The long-haired girl has a faint smile. The man and the woman step forward. The woman says they have just fallen into the worst trap, and the man asks for forgiveness. Armored monsters with helmets or body armor attack a man and a woman. One of them shouts, "Switch," and they fight back to back. They keep fighting, fending off every monster that attacks them. Gracia waves her ball and says next, beckoning as if calling another monster. Alex turns to the girl and praises her work. The man says the girl has mastered the magic sword, while the long-haired girl warns that support mages cannot be used in this dungeon. She attacks one of the monsters, climbs onto it, and cuts off its head. The head flies high from the body. Crazy turns around and says she is not going to die. She does not want one man to laugh at her for falling behind the others. Alec looks at her and says he has never laughed at her. The long-haired girl turns to the man and says he is not good at this either. He did not always use the support magic. The man says the girl already knew everything. Krasia says it's arrogant to speak that way when someone's eating skills are almost as good as El Giyahi's, and the man turns away smiling, leaving the girl without arguing because he's never been good as an elf. Alec sits on the floor and says that since they fell into this trap, it's not the worst thing that happened to him. A man and a woman spot bandages on the floor. One of them says Olivia is already too close. At the same time, Elha and Ernest flee the army of monsters. Elha asks why they had to open the door since it was clearly a trap. Ernest says that if the door was closed, he had to open it. The short-haired girl swings her staff and calls for protection magic with her eyes closed. Elha summons a stone wall, and she and the man on the slab of the first floor rise away from the monsters. She tells him she will leave the monsters to him, and he understands and jumps down. The short-haired girl thinks that even though the guy is out of shape, these monsters can wear him out. A short-haired girl is about to get a physical enhancement. An army of monsters stands ready to attack the man. Ernest keeps running with his gaze fixed ahead. A short-haired girl pushes her staff forward and closes her eyes. She is about to act. Her eyes widen. Ernest runs through ranks of monsters standing motionless and watching him. The monsters remain frozen, staring in a daze and making faint sounds. With a sudden spear thrust, Guy 1 brings several heads down on the monsters closest to him. Ernest watches the fleeing monsters and, surprised, says the boss has already been defeated and is out of action. Ernest looks up and thanks the short-haired girl for helping him because he is having a bad day, and she looks down again. Elha says it's very hard to give a guy a boost, and the guy says her reinforcements helped him a lot and were useful at the right moment, when a monster suddenly roars from the side and the girl turns around, surprised. The monster, its life taken, lies on the floor lifeless while small worms eat it. Elha asks if the demons are really eating each other. The man looks down calmly, holding his spear. One of them splits the little monster in two. The two halves suddenly come to life and start moving. Ernest looks down in surprise and yells that the monsters have split up and come to life, as several attack a short-haired girl who screams and asks the man to get them off her. The short-haired girl thanks the man and says physical attacks do not work on these monsters. The man asks what they should do now. The short-haired girl says these monsters regenerate and must be killed in one hit. The guy says it's too easy. They let out a short laugh. With a sharp movement, he drives his spear in different directions, lifting it up. Ernest shouts to the short-haired girl to watch the flanks, and Elha replies that she understood him. The short-haired girl closes one eye and tells the man to keep it up and fight with all his strength. He keeps fighting monsters as a short-haired girl is summoned by the magic of enchantment. The girl says devastating blow, and the man fights monsters even faster. The man slips his spear behind his back and says the demon was strange. A short-haired girl steps up behind a man, knocks him, and calls him by name. The short-haired girl says it was great, percussive, and very cool. She disagrees with the short-haired girl, who says Ernest is a genius and the best. The man glances at the woman and tells her to save those words for Alec, who needs to build his confidence. The man pauses, then says that Mabel is working now instead of the short-haired girl. A short-haired girl follows a man who is leaving her and calls his name. They stop suddenly. She sees something and looks ahead, puzzled. Elha and Ernest stop with wide eyes when they see something ahead, standing next to a huge object and staring at it in a daze. A huge monster appears in front of the man and woman, and the man holds a weapon in one hand. The blue-haired girl glances up and asks if that's really the boss. The short-haired girl says magical attacks will probably not affect him, and only physical damage will work. The physical damage, he says, is part of him, known as the Millennial Holy Swordsman. Alec and Krazia keep fighting monsters. The long-haired girl says there are many here. The man tells her to calm down, because the monsters are weaker than she thinks. Several monsters attack, and the long-haired girl says she must hurry. With a single strike, the girl defeats several monsters at once, and they fly off lifeless. The long-haired girl looks toward the man who shouts for her to start acting. She walks past two monsters and strikes one with her sharp sword. A girl gathers her strength and fights the monsters while a dome around her stops them from attacking. The girl closes one eye and realizes she needs a shield now. A man appears and attacks the monster to help her. Alec tells the girl not to expect perfect help from him since he is not an elf, and a faint smile plays on his face. The long-haired girl looks at the guy and smiles. Moments later, a guy and a girl move forward as a team. In the distance, they spot the girls sitting on the rocks. A man calls a long-haired girl by name. She says they finally found Olivia. Olivia sits on the rocks, trying to bandage herself. A long-haired girl approaches and calls Olivia by name. Olivia looks at the long-haired girl and says she is still as good as before. The long-haired girl looks back at Olivia. Olivia says she needs a long-haired girl to heal her because the girl is well-versed in healing magic. Krazia looks down at Olivia and gives a firm, confident no. Christia says they came only to get Olivia back, and if the girl heals Olivia, Olivia will run away again. Olivia turns to the man and asks whether he can use healing magic. He admits he is no good at it. Alec steps closer to Olivia and tells her to listen. He says the long-haired girl does not want to bring her back for evil reasons. Despite saying she's always been indifferent to everyone, Alex came all this way to help Olivia, and they can't just leave her here. Kraziot turns sharply toward the man, his face red and angry. He says she can give him a lecture later. Olivia looks away and says she knows and understands everything, and her face looks sad. Olivia says she does not want her hair to grow long because it interferes with her work. The craziest stares come from the side where Olivia is sitting. Olivia says, if a long-haired girl doesn't want to treat her, fine. Olivia will just get in her way. Olivia stands and prepares to leave. Passing a long-haired girl, Olivia apologizes for not being able to pay her properly. Crazier pauses, then says, this is why people take up fencing. Olivier stops and asks what the long-haired girl meant. She turns and says it's stupid to think she owes her anything or should. A girl says Olivier doesn't know anything about support magicians. A long-haired girl points ahead and tells the man not to let Olivia leave. He is surprised at first, then says he understands. Krazia says she really didn't want to do this, but she has her own plans and won't tell Olivia about them until she finds out what's happening. Olivia gives a firm, confident no because it's her only way to get rid of someone. The man turns to Olivia and asks whether she wants to say she will take revenge on the Dark Guild. Olivia repeats that she does not need the Dark Guild. Olivia says she doesn't know what Lulu told him, but it has nothing to do with the guilds or the squad. It's just about her. The man says it, but Mabel is worried about her. Olivia finds out about this and says that we are actually Mabel mediocre. Olivia says the guy and the girl misunderstood everything. If they think everyone is as good as their squad, they are wrong. Nameless is just a group of people in the guild. Each member has their own desires and goals. Finally, Olivia got a once-in-a-lifetime chance and decided to take it. Krazia turns to Olivia and asks whether the girl means the traitor she named earlier, and Olivia confirms and vows to kill that traitor with her own hands. Olivia talks about the man who taught her and abandoned her mother to die. Her eyes are sad and empty. Alec stands, looking ahead with surprised eyes, remembering his teacher and asking Olivia again about his mother and teacher. Olivia turns away from the man as the girls walk off. Hoping they understand, she plans to tell them something again while standing in a circle with a star in the center. Olivia stands confidently and tells others not to stand in her way. Alecans. Crescia noticed Olivia step onto the teleporter, so they sprinted toward it and a man's hand reached out to pull them on just in time. Alec stares ahead, surprised, a drop of sweat trickling down his cheek as the team faces a large number of different monsters ready to attack. A group of people ended up right in a lair of monsters.